Yo, what's up everyone? It's Hogwarts Tales, and today we're checking out, what if Harry's Hogwarts letter was intercepted by Beauxbatons and Fleur Delacour became his classmate from day one. Drop a like if you're hyped. Subscribe for daily content. Let's get this story started. Chapter 1, The Letter That Never Came. The fourth letter arrived on a Wednesday, tucked inside an egg. Harry had been watching Uncle Vernon's face for days now, that particular shade of purple that started at the collar and crept up like a rising tide. It was almost fascinating, the way the man could turn colors. Like a mood ring made of flesh and fury. "Marge is ill," Vernon announced to the kitchen, crumpling the envelope before Harry could so much as read the address. "Wrote to say so. Nothing else." Aunt Petunia's eyes flicked to Harry over the rim of her teacup. She said nothing. She'd been saying nothing for 3 days, which was somehow worse than the usual sharp commentary about his hair or his clothes or his general existence. Harry said nothing either. He'd learned to do that well. But he'd seen his name on the first one. Just a flash, green ink, heavy parchment, and his name written out in a way nobody had ever written it, Mr. H. Potter, the cupboard under the stairs. He'd been too slow. Vernon's thick fingers had snatched it from the mat before Harry could process that someone in the world knew where he slept. The second letter came the next morning. This time there were 2. Vernon burned them in the kitchen sink while Petunia held Dudley's hands over his ears as though the sound of crackling paper might corrupt him. The third batch, 6 letters, shoved through the mail slot with such force they'd scattered across the hallway like leaves, had prompted Vernon to nail the letterbox shut. He'd done it himself, in his dressing gown, at 6:30 in the morning, while the neighbors' curtains twitched. Now it was the egg. Petunia had cracked it for breakfast, and a tightly rolled scroll had tumbled into the frying pan alongside the yolk. She'd screamed. Vernon had gone purple. The egg had burned. Harry sat at the table, stomach empty, and thought about green ink. "We're leaving," Vernon said that evening. He didn't say where. He loaded suitcases into the boot of the car with the manic energy of a man fleeing a crime scene, which, Harry supposed, was almost accurate, except Vernon was the one committing the crime, and the victim was Harry's mail. They drove for hours. Dudley whined about missing a television program. Petunia sat rigid in the passenger seat, lips pressed so thin they disappeared. Harry watched the motorway give way to country roads, then to narrow lanes, then to something that wasn't really a road at all, just tire tracks in mud leading toward a gray, heaving sea. The shack sat on a rock about 100 yards offshore. Vernon paid a man with a missing tooth for a rowboat and rowed them across himself, the oars smacking the water with furious, graceless strokes. Rain came sideways. The shack smelled like seaweed and rot. "Nobody's going to find us here," Vernon said, and for the first time in days, he smiled. Harry lay on the floor that night with Dudley's thin, moth-eaten coat pulled over him, listening to the storm throw itself against the walls. He'd drawn a birthday cake in the dust on the floor. 13 candles, no, 11. He was turning 11. He traced the last line in the dust and watched the seconds tick down on Dudley's cracked watch. 11:57, 11:58. 11:59, he closed his eyes and made a wish. At midnight, something knocked on the door. Not the wind. Not a wave. 3 sharp, deliberate raps, spaced evenly, polite as a dinner guest. Which was impossible, because they were on a rock in the middle of the sea during what felt like the end of the world. Harry sat up. The knocking came again. Same rhythm. Same calm certainty. Upstairs, Vernon's snoring hitched. Petunia made a sound in her sleep. Harry stood. The floor was cold under his bare feet. He crossed the room to the door, which was shuddering slightly, but not from the knocking. From the wind. The knocking itself was precise, contained, as though the storm didn't dare interfere. He reached for the handle. "I wouldn't," said a voice from the other side. Warm. Amused. Accented. The door is about to open on its own. Stand back, please. Harry stepped back. The lock clicked. Not broke, clicked, as though an invisible key had turned it from outside. The door swung open, and the storm blew in, rain and salt and the smell of wet stone, and standing in the doorway was a man. He was tall but not huge. Lean, with dark skin weathered by sun rather than age, and close-cropped silver hair that shone even in the dim light. He wore a long coat the color of midnight blue, buttoned to the throat, and his boots, Harry noticed, because they were right at eye level, were dry. Completely dry, despite the rain hammering down behind him. "Good evening," the man said, and smiled. It was a real smile, the kind that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Or good morning, rather. "Happy birthday, Harry." Harry opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The man stepped inside, and the door shut behind him, again, without being touched. He looked around the shack with the expression of someone examining a restaurant they wouldn't be dining in. "My name is Émile de Roier," he said. "I am a professor at the Beauxbatons Academy of Magic. And I have come a very long way to speak with you." "Who's there?" Vernon appeared at the top of the stairs, a rifle in his hands. Where he'd gotten a rifle, Harry had no idea, his face cycling through several shades faster than a traffic light. "I warn you, I'm armed. You are holding a sporting rifle with no ammunition," de Roier said without looking up. He was unbuttoning his coat, perfectly at ease. "Even if it were loaded, I assure you, it would be a disappointing choice against what I carry. But there is no need for any of that. I'm here for the boy. Now see here." Vernon started down the stairs. De Roier raised one finger. Just one. And Vernon stopped. Not because anything visible happened, there was no flash, no sound. Vernon simply stopped, as though his feet had decided on their own that the bottom of the stairs was quite far enough. "Mr. Dursley," de Roier said, and now his voice had an edge beneath the warmth, "I know what has been happening in this house. The letters. The cupboard. All of it. I am not here to discuss your choices. I am here to offer your nephew one of his own." He turned back to Harry and pulled something from inside his coat. An envelope. Cream-colored, thick, sealed with blue wax. He held it out. "Go on," he said. "It's yours." Harry took it. His hands were shaking, but not from the cold. The envelope was heavy, the paper smooth under his fingers. He turned it over. The seal was stamped with a crest, two crossed wands behind a shield, surrounded by something that looked like laurel leaves. Beneath the crest, in silver script, Beauxbatons Academy of Magic. "I don't understand," Harry said. "Open it." Harry broke the seal. Inside was a letter, written in blue ink on paper that smelled faintly of lavender. "Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have been offered a place at Beauxbatons Academy of Magic. Enclosed you will find a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on the 1st of September. We await your response." Olympe Maxime Headmistress Harry read it twice. Then a third time. The words didn't change. "There's been a mistake," he said. I'm nobody. I'm Harry." Something shifted in de Roisier's expression. The amusement faded, and what replaced it was something heavier. Gentler. "Sit down, Harry," he said. They sat on the broken-backed couch while the storm raged outside, and de Roier told him. Not everything, Harry would realize that later, but enough. Magic was real. Harry was a wizard. His parents had been murdered by a dark wizard named Voldemort, and Harry had survived, and that survival had made him famous in a world he'd never known existed. Famous, Harry repeated. The word felt absurd in his mouth. Extraordinarily so, de Roier said. In Britain, certainly. On the continent as well, though with less fervor. And this school, Beauxbatons? In the south of France. In the mountains. It is one of the 3 great European schools of magic. De Roier paused. The school you were originally meant to attend, Hogwarts, is in Scotland. Their letters are the ones your uncle has been destroying. Harry looked at Vernon, who was still frozen on the stairs, his face a landscape of impotent fury. Petunia had appeared behind him, ghostly in her nightgown. She was staring at de Roier with an expression Harry had never seen on her, not anger, not disgust. Fear. Old fear, the kind that had roots. You knew, Harry said to her. Both of you. You knew what I was. Petunia's throat moved. She said nothing. Why you? Harry turned back to de Roier. If I was supposed to go to Hogwarts, why are you here instead? De Roier studied him. That careful, measuring look again. Because Beauxbatons has its own ways of finding exceptional young witches and wizards. Your magic, Harry, the bursts of it you cannot control, they have been, remarkably loud. We heard you, even across the channel. He leaned forward. And because I arrived first. There was something he wasn't saying. Harry could feel it, the way you could feel a word on the tip of your tongue. But the letter was warm in his hands, and the shack was cold, and somewhere in France there was a school where people like him learned to do impossible things. What if I say yes? Harry asked. Then we leave tonight. And the Dursleys? De Roier glanced at the stairs. They will be informed. They will not object. This was said with absolute certainty. You will not return here unless you choose to. Harry looked around the shack. At the peeling walls, the broken furniture, the birthday cake melting in the dust. At the Dursleys, who had locked him in a cupboard for 10 years and driven him to a rock in the sea to stop him from reading his own mail. Yes, Harry said. I'll go. The storm broke 20 minutes later. By then, Harry and de Roier were already in the rowboat, heading for shore, and the shack was shrinking behind them into the dark. The boat didn't need rowing. It cut through the waves on its own, smooth as a blade through silk, while Harry clutched the sides and tried to process the fact that his entire life had just detonated. How are we getting to France? He asked, because the practical question felt safer than any of the others crowding his skull. De Roier reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a small, tarnished compass. Port key. It will take us to Paris. From there, we will arrange your supplies. Paris, Harry said. The word sounded fake. You will need a wand. Books. Robes. De Roier turned the compass over in his palm. Beauxbatons provides most necessities, but certain things must be selected personally. Your wand, for instance, that is an intimate matter. The wand chooses the wizard. They reached the shore. The car was still parked in the mud, rain drumming on its roof. De Roier didn't spare it a glance. Hold on to this, he said, and held out the compass. Grip tightly. On 3. Harry grabbed it. 1. 2. 3. The world hooked him behind the navel and pulled. He landed on cobblestones, stumbling, his knees buckling. De Roier caught his elbow and steadied him. It gets easier, he said. Harry straightened up and looked around. They were standing in a narrow alley, wet with recent rain but lit by gas lamps that burned an impossible shade of violet. The walls on either side were old, centuries old, by the look of them, with shuttered windows and climbing ivy. Somewhere nearby, someone was playing an accordion, and the smell of fresh bread mingled with something else, something electric and sharp that made the hair on Harry's arms stand up. Where are we? Montmartre. De Roier was already walking. Come. The shops open early for international arrivals. They turned a corner, and Harry stopped. The alley had opened into a square, but not a normal square. It existed below street level, accessed by a staircase that wound down between 2 ordinary-looking buildings. At the bottom was a marketplace that shouldn't have been possible. It was wider than the buildings above it, stretching in every direction, with stalls and shopfronts stacked 3 levels high, connected by floating staircases and bridges made of iron and light. The ceiling, if it could be called that, showed the Paris sky, but clearer, the stars visible despite the city glow. Witches and wizards moved through the space in robes of every color, speaking French so fast it blurred into music. Le Marché des Ombres, de Roier said. The Shadow Market. Beauxbatons students have shopped here since the 15th century. Harry descended the stairs in a daze. They bought his robes first, pale blue silk lined with silver, nothing like the black wool he'd glimpsed in the Hogwarts supply list that had fallen from one of the burned letters. The seamstress, a tiny woman with spectacles that changed color with her mood, took his measurements with a tape that moved on its own while she carried on a rapid-fire conversation with de Roier about the weather. Books came next. The shop was narrow and tall, shelves reaching up into shadow, and everything was in French. Harry pulled a textbook off the shelf, Sortilège's Fondementax, Première Année, and stared at the cover. "I can't read French," he said. The realization hit him like a wall. "I can't speak it either." "How am I supposed to?" "You will learn," de Roier said. Beauxbatons provides language enchantments for the first term. A charm that aids comprehension. It does not do the work for you, you must still study, still practice, but it will bridge the gap. A charm that teaches you a language. That helps you learn one. There is a difference. De Roier pulled several more books from the shelf and added them to the growing stack. Many of our students come from across Europe and North Africa. We have Spanish students, Portuguese, Belgian, Moroccan. French is the language of instruction, but the school is not exclusively French. You will not be the only one struggling. This helped, but only a little. Harry carried his books to the counter and watched de Roier pay with coins he'd never seen before, not the gold galleons from the letter, but smaller, silver pieces stamped with a fleur-de-lis. Beauxbatons maintains a trust fund for scholarship students, de Roier said, catching Harry's expression. Your parents also left you a considerable vault at Gringotts, the Wizarding Bank. But that is in London, and we are not in London. Madame Maxime has ensured you will want for nothing. The wand shop was last. It sat at the far end of the market, down a flight of iron stairs, in a space that felt older than everything around it. The sign above the door read Thibaut et Fils, Baguettes Magiques depuis 1342. The door was black wood with a silver handle shaped like a serpent. Inside, it was quiet. The noise of the market vanished the moment the door closed, replaced by a hum, low, steady, like the building itself was breathing. "Ah," said a voice. A man emerged from between the shelves. He was young, younger than Harry expected, with sharp cheekbones and dark eyes that moved with an unsettling quickness. He wore a leather apron over his robes, and his fingers were stained with something iridescent. "Émile," the man said, nodding to de Roier. Then his gaze landed on Harry, and it stayed there. "So it's true." "Thibaut," de Roier said. "This is Harry Potter. He needs a wand." Thibaut came closer. He didn't offer his hand. Instead, he circled Harry slowly, the way you might circle a sculpture, his head tilted. "Which is your wand arm?" "I'm right-handed," Harry said. "That's not what I asked." Harry blinked. Thibaut smiled, brief, sharp, and lifted Harry's right hand by the wrist, turned it over, pressed his thumb into the center of Harry's palm. Then did the same with the left. "Both," Thibaut murmured. "Interesting." He disappeared into the shelves. Harry heard drawers opening, boxes sliding. Thibaut returned with 3 long, slim cases. The first wand was pale wood, almost white. Harry picked it up and felt nothing. Thibaut snatched it back before he could try anything. The second was darker, heavier. It warmed in Harry's grip, and for a moment he thought this was it, but then it vibrated, once, sharply, like a rejection, and went cold. Thibaut's eyes narrowed. He took the wand back, looked at Harry again, and then walked to the very back of the shop. Harry heard him arguing with someone, or with himself, in French too fast to follow. He came back carrying a single box, older than the others, the wood darkened with age. "Rosewood," Thibault said, opening the box. 11 inches. "The core is a sphinx hair, freely given. I have only 3 wands with this core. This one has been here for 41 years. No one has been able to wake it." The wand was beautiful. Dark reddish-brown, with a slight curve and a handle that looked carved by hand. Harry picked it up. The hum that had filled the shop since he'd walked in rose, not in volume but in pitch, climbing like a voice reaching for a high note. Warmth flooded up his arm. The tips of his fingers tingled. And then, without him doing anything at all, the wand erupted, not sparks, not light, but heat. A wave of it, dry and clean, like opening an oven door, and every candle in the shop flared twice as bright. Thibault let out a breath he'd been holding for 41 years. "There," he said softly. "There she is." Harry held the wand and felt, for the first time in his life, like something fit. They left Paris before dawn. Another port key, this one disguised as a fountain pen, carried them south. Harry landed on grass this time, soft and damp with dew, and when he looked up, his breath stopped. The palace rose from the mountains like it had grown there. It was white stone and blue slate, with towers that caught the first light of dawn and threw it back in gold. Gardens cascaded down the hillside in terraces of green and violet, and the air smelled of rosemary and something sweeter, magic, Harry was beginning to realize. Magic had a smell. Clean and sharp, like the air after lightning. "Beauxbatons," de Roier said. Students were already arriving. Carriages pulled by winged horses descended from the sky in pairs, landing on a wide lawn at the base of the palace. Harry watched a girl step out of one, her robes perfectly pressed, her trunk floating behind her. "Term doesn't begin until tomorrow," de Roier said, "but you'll sleep here tonight. I'll show you to the guest quarters. Tomorrow, you'll be sorted." "Sorted?" "Into your house. Beauxbatons has 3, Maison Papillombre, Maison Ombrelon, and Maison Soulclat." He paused, reading Harry's blank expression. "You'll understand tomorrow. For now, rest. You've had a long night." Harry didn't rest. He sat on the bed in his small, clean room, a real bed, with sheets and pillows and a window that looked out over the mountains, and held his wand and tried to believe any of this was real. He fell asleep with his glasses on, the wand clutched in his hand like a lifeline. The next morning was chaos. Harry woke to sunlight and noise, dozens of voices echoing off stone corridors, footsteps, laughter, the clatter of trunks being levitated badly and crashing into walls. He dressed in his new blue robes, which fit perfectly despite the seamstress having spent exactly 40 seconds measuring him, and stepped into the hallway. He was immediately lost. Beauxbatons was nothing like the Dursleys' house, where every room served a rigid, joyless function. This was a palace in the truest sense, vaulted ceilings painted with scenes of magical history, floors of polished marble that reflected the light from windows 3 stories tall. Staircases swept upward in graceful curves. Courtyards opened unexpectedly off hallways, filled with fountains and climbing roses. Portraits watched him pass, murmuring to each other in French. Harry found the main hall by following the crowd. It was enormous, a cathedral of a room with a ceiling that showed the open sky, enchanted to display whatever weather was happening outside. Right now, that was a perfect September morning, cloudless and gold. Long tables stretched the length of the hall, already filling with students. Harry didn't know where to sit. He didn't know anyone. He stood in the doorway, 11 years old and utterly alone, and felt the familiar cold weight of not belonging settle over him. "Move." He turned. A girl was standing behind him, waiting to get through the door. She was his age, maybe a year older in the way she held herself, with long silver blonde hair pulled back from her face and blue eyes that radiated impatience. You're blocking the door, she said. Her English was accented but precise. Sorry. Harry stepped aside. She walked past without another glance. Two other girls fell into step beside her, and the three of them moved through the hall with a kind of collective grace that made Harry think of a school of fish, effortless, synchronized, completely unaware of how out of place they made everyone else look. Harry found a seat at the end of a table. The boy next to him, dark-haired, stocky, with a friendly, open face, looked at him and said something in French. Sorry, I don't speak, the boy switched to English with barely a hitch. You are the English one. The transfer? Harry. Harry Potter. The boy's eyes went wide. Just for a second. Then he grinned and extended his hand. Luc Beaumont. First year also. You are famous, yes. My mother told me about you. Apparently, Harry said. You don't like being famous? I only found out about it yesterday. Luke stared at him. Then laughed. This is going to be a very interesting year. Before Harry could respond, the hall fell silent. Not gradually, all at once, as though someone had pressed a button. Every head turned toward the front of the room. Madame Maxime was not what Harry expected. She was enormous, easily twice the height of a normal person, with a handsome, olive-skinned face and black hair swept up in an elegant knot. She wore robes of dark amber silk, and when she walked, the floor trembled slightly, though whether that was her size or her presence, Harry couldn't tell. She spoke in French. Luke leaned over and whispered rough translations in Harry's ear, welcome to a new year, expectations of excellence, something about the gardens being off-limits past the third terrace. Then Maxime switched to English. The hall rustled with surprise. This year, we welcome a student from Britain. Harry Potter will be joining the first-year class. Every eye in the room found him. Harry felt the heat climb up his neck. He is to be treated as any other student, Maxime continued. No more, no less. Am I understood? A murmur of assent. The silver-blonde girl, 3 seats down from Harry at a different table, was looking at him now. Not with curiosity. With something closer to annoyance, as though his presence was a disruption she hadn't agreed to. Their eyes met. Harry looked away first. The sorting, or whatever Beauxbatons called it, happened after breakfast. First years were led to an underground chamber beneath the palace, down a spiral staircase lit by floating blue flames. The room at the bottom was circular, with a domed ceiling and a single object in its center, a brazier, waist-high, filled with fire that burned without fuel. La Flamme de Vérité, de Roier had called it when he'd briefed Harry that morning. The flame of truth. You stepped up, put your hand in the fire, and the fire told you who you were. It doesn't burn, Luke whispered beside him. My brother told me. It's warm, but it doesn't burn. Your brother said that. He also said the food in second year gets worse, so maybe don't trust everything. They went alphabetically by surname. Harry watched student after student approach the brazier, reach in, and have the fire change color around their hand. Blue for Papillombre. Silver for Ombrelun. Gold for Solclat. A professor standing beside the brazier announced each result, and cheers erupted from the corresponding house tables. Luke went early. The fire turned gold around his hand, and he pumped his fist as Solclat cheered. He grinned at Harry from across the chamber. The silver-blonde girl was called next. Delacour, Fleur. She walked to the brazier with the same effortless poise she'd shown in the doorway. No hesitation. She put her hand in the flame, and for a moment, nothing happened. The fire flickered. Shifted. Then it blazed, not blue, not silver, not gold, but white. Pure, searing white, bright enough that students shielded their eyes. The professor beside the brazier took a step back. Then the white faded, settling into silver. Ombrelun. Fleur withdrew her hand and walked to her table. If she was shaken by what had happened, she didn't show it. But Harry noticed the professor exchanging a glance with another staff member, and the glance said more than words would have. More names. More colors. The chamber grew warmer. Potter, Harry. The whispers rose like steam. Harry walked to the brazier, his new wand a solid weight in his pocket, and looked into the fire. It was ordinary looking, orange, crackling, the kind of fire you'd find in any hearth. But up close, he could feel it. Not heat. Attention. The fire was watching him. He put his hand in. It was warm. Luke's brother hadn't lied. But it was also alive. It moved around his fingers, between them, exploring, tasting. Harry stood still and let it. The fire turned gold. Soulclat. Harry felt relief. Luke was in Soulclat, and the idea of knowing at least one person, then the gold flickered. Shifted. Blue bled in from the edges, and then silver, and for 3 heartbeats the flame around Harry's hand was all 3 colors at once, swirling like oil on water, unable to decide. The chamber was silent. The professor looked at Harry. Harry looked at the fire. And then it settled. Gold. Warm, steady gold. Soulclat. The cheering was loud but uncertain, laced with the murmur of people who'd seen the hesitation and didn't know what it meant. Harry pulled his hand free and walked to the Soulclat table, where Luke was clapping hard enough to hurt his own palms. That was mental, Luke said. 3 colors. I've never heard of that. Is that bad? I have no idea. But it's definitely going to be a thing. Harry sat down. Across the hall, at the Ombrelun table, Fleur Delacour was watching him again. This time, the annoyance had been replaced by something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or suspicion. It was hard to tell with a face that composed. Harry looked back at her. This time, neither of them looked away first. It was Luke who broke the moment, elbowing Harry in the ribs to pass the bread. Classes started the next day, and Harry hit the wall immediately. The language charm, cast on him by a bored-looking professor who flicked her wand at his temple like she was swatting a fly, helped with comprehension. He could understand French when it was spoken, mostly. Written French came through in patches, like a radio signal fading in and out. But speaking it was a different beast entirely. The words tangled in his mouth. His accent was atrocious. The first time he tried to answer a question in Charm's class, the entire room went quiet, and a boy in the back row laughed. Practical magic was better. In their first sortileges lesson, the professor, a young woman named Valancourt with ink-stained fingers and an infectious energy, had them practicing the levitation charm. Concentration, she said, pacing between the desks. Beauxbatons teaches finesse before force. Feel the intention. Don't just wave your wand, mean it. Harry pointed his wand at the feather on his desk. He'd never done deliberate magic before. All the magic he'd ever done, making glass disappear at the zoo, turning a teacher's wig blue, appearing on the school roof, had been accidental. Emotional. Uncontrolled. He focused. Thought about the feather rising. Moved his wand. The feather shot to the ceiling like a bullet, embedded itself in the plaster, and stayed there. Valancourt stared up at it. The class stared at Harry. Well, Valancourt said slowly. The power is certainly there. We may need to work on the finesse. Luke, whose feather had risen a wobbly 6 inches before collapsing, looked at Harry with a mixture of admiration and mock offense. Show off. I didn't mean to, sure you didn't. After class, Harry was crossing the courtyard when someone stepped into his path. A boy, older, maybe 3rd year, with sandy hair and a jaw set like a challenge. Potter. Yeah. Is it true Dumbledore wanted you at Hogwarts? Harry didn't know who Dumbledore was, beyond a name on a letter he'd never received. I don't know. I got offered a place here. You should have gone there. The boy's lip curled. Beauxbatons doesn't need Britain's leftovers. Something cold settled in Harry's stomach. Not fear, he'd grown up with Dudley, and Dudley was twice this boy's size. Something older. The familiar sting of being told you didn't belong. Leave him alone, Renaud. The voice came from behind Harry. He turned and found Fleur Delacour standing 3 feet away, her arms crossed, her expression flat. Renaud's sneer wavered. Something shifted behind his eyes when he looked at Fleur, a glazed, unfocused quality, like he'd lost his train of thought. He blinked hard, shook it off, and the sneer returned, but weaker. I'm not talking to you, half-breed, he said. Fleur didn't flinch. Didn't react at all. She just looked at him, and the temperature in the courtyard dropped, actually dropped. Harry felt it, a chill that crept in from nowhere and settled into the stones. Walk away, Fleur said quietly. Or don't. It makes no difference to me. Renaud walked away. He tried to make it look casual. It wasn't. Harry turned to Fleur. Thanks. Don't thank me. I didn't do it for you. She uncrossed her arms. Renaud is an idiot who has been calling me that since I was 9. I don't need an excuse to shut his mouth. Still, Harry said. Thanks. Fleur studied him. Up close, she was striking in a way that went beyond pretty. There was something luminous about her, a quality Harry couldn't name, like she was standing in better light than everyone else. You are the boy whose fire couldn't decide, she said. And you're the girl whose fire turned white. For half a second, so brief he almost missed it, the corner of her mouth twitched. Not a smile. The ghost of one. Don't follow me, she said, and walked away. Harry stood in the courtyard, the sun warm on his face, and watched her go. That evening, he sat on the terrace outside the Solclat common room and wrote a letter. He didn't know who to send it to, he had no one. No family who'd want to hear from him, no friends from his old life. So he wrote it to himself. I'm at a school in France. I'm a wizard. I have a wand made of rosewood with a sphinx hair inside it. My fire turned gold but almost didn't. There's a girl here whose fire turned white and a boy named Luke who laughs at everything and a professor who caught me before I fell off a portkey. The Dursleys never told me. 10 years and they never told me. I'm angry about that. I think I'm allowed to be. The mountains are beautiful. I can see them from my window. I've never seen mountains before. I think I might belong here. I don't know yet. But nobody's locked me in a cupboard, and the food is good, and my wand is warm in my pocket and it feels like it knows me. That's enough for now. He folded the letter and put it in his trunk. Then he sat on the windowsill and looked out at the Pyrenees, dark against a sky full of stars, and breathed. Somewhere far to the north, across the channel, in a castle Harry had never seen, an old man with a long silver beard sat behind a desk and stared at an empty chair where a boy should have been sitting. He's not coming, Albus, said the woman standing beside him. She wore emerald green robes and a tight expression. Maxime has him. Yes, Albus Dumbledore said. It appears she does. What are we going to do? Dumbledore was quiet for a long time. The instruments on his desk whirred and clicked. The portraits on the walls pretended to sleep. For now, he said, nothing. The woman stared at him. He is safe, Dumbledore said. He is learning. He is, for the first time in his life, in a place where magic is not a secret or a shame. He folded his hands. That was always the goal, Minerva. The rest will come in time. And if time runs out? Dumbledore didn't answer. He looked out the window at the Scottish Highlands, dark and wild and empty of the boy he'd spent 10 years watching over from a distance. The boy who'd slipped through his fingers and landed somewhere warm. Back in the Pyrenees, Harry closed his window, climbed into bed, and slept without dreaming for the first time he could remember. His wand sat on the nightstand beside his glasses, still warm. Outside, the stars burned, and the palace hummed, and somewhere in the gardens below, a fountain carved with ancient runes sang softly to the mountains. He was 11 years old, 1,000 miles from the cupboard under the stairs, and tomorrow he would learn magic. It was, by any measure, the best birthday present he'd ever received, even if it had come a day late. Chapter 2, A Tongue of Fire. 3 weeks into term, Harry Potter learned the French word for disaster by living it. The morning started badly. He'd overslept, the enchanted clock on his nightstand had chimed in French, and his half-asleep brain had interpreted sept heures as still early, instead of you're late for herbology. He'd thrown on his robes, grabbed his wand, and sprinted through the palace corridors with one shoe untied, arriving at the greenhouses just as Professor Lefebvre was closing the door. Lefebvre was a patient woman. She taught herbology the way some people played chess, slowly, deliberately, with an emphasis on thinking 3 moves ahead. She did not appreciate students who arrived out of breath and smelling like they'd run through a rosemary hedge, which Harry had, because the shortest route to the greenhouses cut through the 3rd terrace garden. "Monsieur Potter," she said. "How kind of you to join us." "Sorry, Professor. The clock speaks French." "Yes. As does this class." She held the door open. "Sit." Harry sat. Luke, already at their shared bench, slid a pair of dragon-hide gloves toward him without looking up. He was examining a plant that looked like a cross between a fern and a jellyfish, translucent fronds that pulsed with a faint inner light. "Luminaise," Luke whispered. "Don't touch the tips. They sting." Lefebvre began her lecture. Harry caught about 2/3 of it through the language charm, enough to understand that they were meant to repot the luminaise without triggering its defensive mechanism, which apparently involved the plant emitting a burst of light bright enough to temporarily blind everyone in a 3-meter radius. He understood the theory. Execution was another matter. His hands were steady enough. He'd developed decent manual dexterity from years of chores at the Desleys, scrubbing, peeling, weeding Aunt Petunia's garden. But the luminaise required a specific technique. You had to grip the base with your left hand while using your wand to coax the roots free with a gentle warming charm. The incantation was French. The pronunciation mattered. Harry pointed his wand at the root system. Tidur daus. The plant exploded with light. The flash was blinding. Students yelped. Someone knocked over a pot. Harry stumbled backward, after images swimming in his vision, and crashed into the bench behind him where a girl from Omberlin was working. "Sorry, I'm sorry, mon Dieu," the girl said, rubbing her eyes. "What did you say to it?" "I said the warming charm, you said tidur douche," Luke said, blinking rapidly. "That means warm shower. You told the plant you were going to give it a bath." The class laughed. Not all of them, some were still rubbing their eyes, but enough. Harry felt the heat creep up his neck. Lefebvre restored order with a sharp word, repaired the damage with a flick of her wand, and moved on. But the laughter sat in Harry's chest like a stone for the rest of the hour. It wasn't the first time. Every day brought a new humiliation, a botched pronunciation, a misunderstood instruction, a moment where the gap between what he meant and what came out of his mouth became a canyon. In Transfiguration, he'd accidentally asked Professor Dumont for permission to go to the bathroom when he'd meant to ask for a new quill. In History of Magic, he'd written an entire paragraph about the Goblin Wars using the wrong tense, turning a historical account into what his professor gently described as creative fiction. The other students were mostly kind about it. The younger ones, anyway. But there was always someone, a snicker in the corridor, a muttered comment he couldn't quite catch, a look that said, "Why are you here?" Renaud, the sandy-haired boy from the courtyard, was the worst. He never said anything directly to Harry anymore, not since Fleur had shut him down, but he'd taken to making loud comments in rapid French whenever Harry passed, speaking just fast enough that the language charm couldn't keep up. Harry caught fragments: English, charity case, doesn't belong. He learned to keep his head down. He learned which corridors Renaud favored and which routes avoided them. He learned to sit in the back of classrooms so nobody could see when he couldn't follow the lesson. He learned, in short, to be small again. And he hated it. The letter from Dumbledore arrived on a Thursday. Harry was eating breakfast, or trying to. The Soulclat table favored croissants and strong coffee, neither of which he'd grown up with, when an owl dropped a heavy envelope directly into his orange juice. Not a French owl. This one was large, tawny, and looked profoundly out of place among the sleek, pale birds that served as Beauxbatons post carriers. The envelope was thick parchment, sealed with red wax. Harry dried it with his sleeve and opened it. Dear Harry, I hope this letter finds you well. My name is Albus Dumbledore, and I am the headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. I was a friend of your parents. It was my expectation that you would attend Hogwarts, as both your mother and father did before you. I understand that circumstances led to a different outcome, and I respect the choice that was made. However, I want you to know that Hogwarts remains open to you. A place has been held in your name. There are things I wish to discuss with you, things pertaining to your parents, your history, and your future. I would welcome the opportunity to meet, at your convenience. With warm regards, Albus Dumbledore. Harry read it twice. The tone was warm but careful, the handwriting looping and precise. It read like an invitation, but felt like something else. A hand reaching across the channel, patient and long-fingered. What's that? Luke asked through a mouthful of croissant. Letter from the headmaster of Hogwarts. Luke stopped chewing. Dumbledore? Dumbledore wrote to you. You know him. Everyone knows him. My mother says he's the most powerful wizard in the world. Or was. Luke swallowed. What does he want? He wants me to come to Hogwarts. Are you going? Harry folded the letter and put it in his pocket. I'm here, aren't I? But the letter stayed warm against his hip all day, and that evening, he took it to Madame Maxime's office. The headmistress's office was at the top of the West Tower, accessible by a spiraling staircase wide enough for Maxime herself, which made it absurdly wide for anyone else. Harry felt like a marble rolling up a drainpipe. The door at the top was mahogany, carved with the Beauxbatons crest, and it opened before he knocked. Come in, Harry. Maxime's office was less cluttered than he'd expected. Large, obviously, the furniture was scaled to her, but elegant, with high windows looking out over the mountains and a fireplace that burned low and warm. She sat behind a desk the size of a dining table, a teacup that could have doubled as a soup bowl in her hand. You received a letter, she said. Not a question. Harry pulled it from his pocket and set it on the desk. From Dumbledore. He says he held a place for me at Hogwarts. Maxime set down her teacup. She didn't reach for the letter. And how do you feel about that? Confused. Harry paused. He says he was a friend of my parents. He was. Maxime chose her words carefully. Albus Dumbledore was instrumental in the fight against the Dark Lord who killed your mother and father. He is a great wizard and, by many accounts, a good man. But? Maxime's eyebrows rose slightly. I didn't say, but. You were about to. The ghost of a smile. You are perceptive, Harry. That will serve you well. She leaned back. Dumbledore expected you at Hogwarts. He had plans for you, not unkind plans, I believe, but plans nonetheless. When Beauxbatons offered you a place instead, it disrupted those plans. He is not accustomed to disruption. Are you saying he's angry? I'm saying he is persistent. And that he believes very strongly that he knows what is best. Maxime met his eyes. The question is whether you agree. Harry thought about the shack on the rock. About green ink and burned envelopes and a cupboard under the stairs. About a man who'd spent 10 years watching over him from a distance without once intervening in the life he was actually living. I want to stay, Harry said. Maxime nodded. Then you stay. I will write to Dumbledore myself. What will you tell him? The truth. That you are a student of Beauxbatons, that you are thriving. Harry almost laughed at that, and that you are where you choose to be. Harry left the office feeling lighter than he had in days. The staircase spiraled down, and the palace settled around him, and for a few minutes, the weight of being Harry Potter eased enough that he could just be Harry. It lasted until he turned the corner on the third floor and ran directly into Fleur Delacour. Not metaphorically. Physically. She was coming around the corner fast, a stack of books in her arms, and Harry was looking at his feet, and they collided with enough force that her books went everywhere and Harry's glasses flew off his face. Oh, Fleur began in French, then switched to English when she saw who it was. You. Of course. Sorry. Harry was on his knees, gathering books. He found his glasses, slightly bent, and shoved them back on. I wasn't looking. Clearly. She crouched to collect her books. Harry reached for the same one she did, and their fingers brushed. Fleur pulled her hand back like she'd touched a hot stove. I can get them, Harry said. I don't need your help. I didn't say you did. They're right here. They gathered the books in tense silence. Harry stacked them and held them out to her. Fleur took them without thanks, tucked a strand of silver blonde hair behind her ear, and looked at him with that same evaluating expression she'd worn in the courtyard. You've been struggling, she said. It wasn't a question, and it wasn't said with sympathy. It was clinical. Observational. I'm fine, Harry said. You pronounced Tidur wrong in herbology and blinded half the class. You heard about that? Everyone heard about that. The girl from Omberlin was complaining for hours. Harry's jaw tightened. Right. Well. Thanks for the update. He turned to go. You should get a tutor, Fleur said to his back. Thanks. I'll add it to the list. He walked away. Her voice followed him down the corridor. Your accent is terrible, Potter. Someone should tell you. You just did, he called back without turning around. He didn't see the expression on her face, halfway between irritation and something that, in a different light, might have looked like concern. The notice appeared on the Solclat Common Room board 2 days later, Academic Partnerships, First Years. By order of the faculty, students struggling in any core subject would be assigned a partner from the same year to assist with coursework, practice, and exam preparation. Participation was mandatory. Harry's partner was Fleur Delacour. He stared at the notice for a long time, convinced he was misreading it. He checked twice. 3 times. His name. Her name. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 2 hours after dinner, in the East Study Hall. That's got to be a coincidence, Luke said, reading over his shoulder. She's in Omberlin. I'm in Solclat. How is this even possible? Cross-house pairings. They do it to encourage unity. Or to torture people. Hard to tell. Luke grinned. Maybe she'll teach you how to say Tidur properly. Shut up, Luke. Their first session was on a Monday evening. The East Study Hall was a long, wood-paneled room with arched windows and desks arranged in pairs. A few other partnership duos were already there, mostly older students, heads bowed over textbooks, speaking in low murmurs. Harry arrived first. He sat, laid out his books, and waited. Fleur arrived exactly on time, her own books stacked neatly, her expression suggesting she'd rather be anywhere else in the world. Let's be clear, she said, sitting down across from him. I didn't volunteer for this. Professor Valancourt assigned me because I have the highest marks in sortileges, and you have the lowest. Great start. I'm not going to waste my time. If you don't take this seriously, I'll go to Valancourt and request a reassignment. I take it seriously, Harry said. It's hard. Everything's in French, and the charm only goes so far, and, stop explaining. Show me your charms essay. Harry slid the parchment across the desk. Fleur read it. Her expression didn't change, but she reached for her quill, dipped it in ink, and began correcting. Within 2 minutes, the margins were full of blue annotations. Your theory is acceptable, she said. Your grammar is a catastrophe. You conjugate everything in present tense, even when discussing historical developments. And you use être when you mean avoir in almost every sentence. I've been studying French for 3 weeks. And you've been making the same mistakes for 3 weeks. That means you're not learning from them. She set the quill down. Why didn't you ask for help sooner? I didn't want to, he stopped. Bother anyone? Look weak. Fleur's eyebrows rose. Pride is expensive when you can't speak the language. It's not pride, Harry said. Where I came from, asking for help wasn't really an option. You figured things out yourself or you didn't figure them out at all. Something shifted in Fleur's expression. Just a flicker. Where did you come from, exactly? Surrey. That tells me nothing. Good. They looked at each other. The silence stretched. Then Fleur picked up her quill again and pointed to the first correction on his essay. Avoir, not être, she said. When you talk about what something has done, you use avoir. When you talk about what something is, you use être. English conflates these. French does not. Start there. They worked for 2 hours. Fleur was a brutal teacher, impatient, exacting, and completely unwilling to accept good enough. She corrected Harry's pronunciation without mercy, made him rewrite sentences until the grammar was clean, and quizzed him on vocabulary without warning. When he got something right, she said nothing. When he got something wrong, she fixed it and moved on. It was, Harry realized around the 90-minute mark, the most effective learning experience he'd ever had. Better, Fleur said at the end, gathering her books. Not good. Better. Thank you, Harry said. Wednesday. Same time. Don't be late. She left. Harry sat in the study hall for a few minutes after, looking at his essay with its blue ink corrections, and felt something he hadn't felt since the night on the rock when Roier had handed him the envelope. Hope. They fell into a rhythm. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. 2 hours of grammar, vocabulary, spellwork theory, and the occasional argument that left other students in the study hall glancing nervously at them. You're overthinking the wand movement, Fleur said on Wednesday of the second week. They'd moved from essay corrections to practical spell theory, and Fleur had brought a diagram of the basic levitation charms wand path. I'm doing exactly what the book says. The book says swish and flick. You're doing swish, pause, think about it, reconsider, flick. By the time you finish, the intention has dissipated. Intention. Beauxbatons teaches intention-driven casting. Your wand amplifies what you mean. If you hesitate, the wand receives a muddled signal. She pulled her own wand, pale birch, elegant, and demonstrated. A smooth, continuous motion, wrist loose, fingers firm. The quill on the desk floated upward, steady as a balloon. See? No pauses. The motion and the meaning are one thing. Harry tried. The quill jerked upward, wobbled, and floated, not gracefully, but steadily. Better, Fleur said. Which, from her, was practically a standing ovation. They didn't talk about personal things. Not at first. The sessions were strictly academic, and Fleur maintained a distance that was almost physical. She never sat closer than arm's length, never touched him, rarely made eye contact that lasted more than a few seconds. Harry respected it. He recognized the architecture of those walls, he'd built similar ones. The crack came on a Friday, late in the 3rd week of their partnership. They were reviewing history of magic, specifically, the Vila Wars of the 16th century. Harry's textbook covered them in a single, clinical chapter that discussed the conflict between European magical governments and Vila clans over territorial sovereignty. It was dry, factual, and completely devoid of the thing Harry noticed when he read it. "This is about you," he said. "I mean, your people." Fleur's quill stopped moving. "My people. Vila. The wars were fought against Vila, right? The book makes it sound like, it calls them creatures. Not people. Creatures. Yes." Fleur's voice was very even. "That is how history records it. But that's wrong. You're not, I'm quarter Vila, Potter. My grandmother was full. My mother is half." She set down her quill with the kind of deliberate control that suggested she wanted to snap it. "I am aware of how history records my family's existence. I'm sorry. You didn't mean to bring up the fact that half the textbooks in this school describe my ancestors as subhuman. How careless of you. Fleur, don't." She stood up. "We're done for tonight. We still have 40 minutes. I said we're done." She gathered her things and left. Harry sat there, staring at the open textbook, and felt like an idiot. He hadn't meant to hurt her. He'd meant, what? To acknowledge it? To show he'd noticed? As though she needed some English boy who couldn't conjugate avoir to point out that her own history was written in someone else's language. He found her an hour later, in the palace gardens. The third terrace, the one that was technically off-limits after dark, was a quiet, overgrown space where wisteria climbed the ancient stone walls and the fountain in the center had long since stopped working. Harry had discovered it during his first week, when he'd been too anxious to sleep and had wandered the grounds until a prefect chased him back inside. He'd come back twice since, always alone. Fleur was sitting on the fountain's edge, her robes pulled tight around her against the night chill. She wasn't crying, Harry couldn't imagine her crying, but there was a stillness to her that was different from her usual composure. "Roier. You're breaking curfew," Harry said from the archway. "So are you." He walked over and sat on the fountain's edge, leaving a careful distance between them. The mountains were dark shapes against a darker sky, and the only light came from the palace windows above. "I'm sorry about what I said," Harry told her. "I wasn't trying to, I just noticed, and it bothered me, and I said it badly." Fleur was quiet for a moment. "Most people don't notice at all. Or they notice and don't care." "Well, that's rubbish. It's the world." She looked at him. "Do you know what it's like to walk into a room and have every boy stare at you? Not because of who you are or what you've done, but because of what you are. Because your blood makes them stupid?" Harry thought about that. "No. But I know what it's like to walk into a room and have everyone stare at your forehead." The silence stretched between them. Somewhere in the garden, a night bird was calling. "It's not the same," Fleur said, "but there was less edge in it." "No. But it's close enough to recognize." Fleur studied him for a long time. The moonlight caught the silver in her hair, and for a moment she looked less like an 11-year-old girl and more like something out of the paintings in the palace corridors, ancient, luminous, separate from the ordinary world. Then she snorted. "Your accent is still terrible." "I know. You said "ca me Jean" in Transfiguration today. You meant to say "ca me derange." What did I actually say?" Roughly translated. "It makes me embarrassed in an intimate way." Harry covered his face with his hands. "Oh, God. To Professor Dumont. Who is 67. The laugh came up from Harry's chest before he could stop it, real, full, the kind that shook his shoulders. And then Fleur was laughing too, a bright, startled sound, as though she'd surprised herself. They sat on the fountain and laughed, and the night was cold and the mountains were dark and neither of them was alone. It wasn't friendship. Not yet. But it was something. In the weeks that followed, Harry's French improved faster than anyone expected. By the 6th week of term, the language charm's effects were fading, not because it was failing, but because he was outpacing it. He could follow lectures without the mental delay. He could write essays that Fleur described as adequate, with occasional moments of competence. He could even argue, which he discovered during a heated debate with Luc about whether the Solclat Quidditch team, Beauxbatons played a variant called Voltage that used smaller goals and no bludgers, was any good. They lost to Oberlin last year by 300 points, Luc said. So. We've got new players this year. We've got you, and you've never even sat on a broom. I've sat on a broom, Harry said. Which was true. Roier had given him a borrowed school broom during the second week, and the flying instructor, Madame Beauxbatons, had spent 10 minutes watching Harry take to the air before declaring, in a tone of professional awe, that he was a natural. Flying was the one thing where language didn't matter. In the air, Harry's body knew what to do. He leaned and the broom responded. He dove and the world rushed up to meet him and his heart hammered and he felt free in a way that nothing else in his life had ever made him feel. Madame Beauxbatons had him running drills with the older students by the third week, and by the fifth, she brought him to the Solclat Voltage captain with a look that said you're welcome. But outside the air, Harry's challenges were more terrestrial. Professor Morel taught defense against the dark arts, or defense contre les forces du mal, as it was called at Beauxbatons. He was a lean, angular man in his 50s, with deep-set eyes that rarely blinked and a stillness about him that made Harry think of coiled springs. He wore his robes like armor, buttoned to the wrists, and he moved through the classroom with a precise, military efficiency that left no room for disorder. He was, by consensus, the best teacher at Beauxbatons. Also the most unsettling. His first class with the first years had started with a question, who can tell me what a dark wizard fears? Silence. 25 11-year-olds stared. Light, someone offered. No. Other wizards? Horrors? Incorrect. Death? Harry said. Morel turned to him. Those deep-set eyes fixed on Harry's face, specifically, on his scar. Elaborate, Monsieur Potter. Well, the dark wizard everyone talks about. Voldemort. The room flinched. Morel did not. He was afraid of dying. That's why that's what the books say. He was trying to live forever. And did he succeed? No. He died. Did he? The question hung in the air. Morel held Harry's gaze for a beat too long, then turned back to the class and continued the lesson. But Harry felt it, a tremor of something in the professor's attention. Not hostility. Interest. The dangerous kind. After class, Morel called him back. Your scar, he said. No preamble. How did you get it? Voldemort. When he killed my parents. And do you know what spell leaves a mark like that? No. The killing curse. Avada Kedavra. It leaves no mark on the body, it simply ends life. Clean. Instantaneous. Morel stepped closer. Except on you. I survived. You did more than survive. You deflected it. That's not survival. That's something else entirely. Morel's gaze was clinical, dissecting. Have you had headaches since arriving? Discomfort in the scar? Harry hesitated. He had, actually, a faint prickling sensation, usually at night, usually when he was falling asleep. He'd attributed it to stress. Sometimes, he said. Morel nodded slowly. If it worsens, come to me. Not the infirmary. Me. Why? Because Madame Beauregard, admirable healer though she is, has never treated a wound inflicted by the killing curse. I have, studied them, at least. A pause. I lost people in the war, Potter. My wife. My daughter. They were in London when the Death Eaters attacked. I know what the Dark Lord's magic feels like. I know its signature. Harry looked at the professor and saw, beneath the stillness, something he recognized. Loss. The kind that doesn't fade, just calcifies. "I'm sorry about your family," Harry said. Morel's expression didn't change, but his shoulders shifted, a fractional relaxation that was almost invisible. "Go to dinner, Potter. And keep me informed about the scar." Harry left the classroom feeling as though he'd had a conversation on two levels, and he'd only been able to hear one. That night, he told Fleur about it. They'd taken to meeting on the third terrace after their study sessions, not every night, but often enough that it had become a habit. The garden was their neutral ground, a space outside the politics of house allegiance and language barriers. Morel asked about your scar. Fleur frowned. "That's personal." He said he'd studied wounds from the killing curse. He lost his family in the First War. Everyone knows that. It changed him. Fleur picked at the moss on the fountain's edge. "He used to be different, my mother says. She was a student here 20 years ago. She said he was warm. Funny, even. Now he's coiled. That's one word for it. He told me to come to him if my scar got worse. Not the infirmary. Him." Fleur looked at him sharply. "And you don't find that strange?" "I find everything about this place strange. I've been a wizard for 6 weeks. That's not what I mean." She turned to face him fully. "Morel is brilliant, but he's also obsessive. My mother warned me about that specifically. She said he's been researching something, some kind of ancient protection magic, for years. Ever since his family died. The other professors don't talk about it, but there are rumors." "What kind of rumors?" "That he goes into the restricted section of the archives. Late at night. That he's looking for something beneath the school." Harry thought about Morel's eyes. The way they'd fixed on his scar with an intensity that went beyond academic curiosity. "He was studying me," Harry said slowly. "Not just asking about the scar. Studying it. Like it was a specimen." "Then be careful," Fleur said. "I don't think he means you harm. But people who are driven by grief don't always see clearly." It was the most personal thing she'd ever said to him. Harry looked at her, and she looked away, and the moment passed. "Your pronunciation of forces du mal was better today," she said. "Thanks. You're still rolling the R wrong. I know. Like a cat trying to purr with a mouthful of cotton." "Thank you, Fleur. Very helpful." She smiled. A real one, small and quick, gone before it fully formed. But Harry saw it, and he carried it back to the Solclat common room like a coin in his pocket, small, bright, worth more than its weight. October arrived and brought with it the kind of cold that made the Pyrenees look like teeth against the sky. Beauxbatons' heating charms kept the palace warm, but the grounds were brutal, frost on the terraces, ice in the fountains, a biting wind that came down from the mountains and found every gap in your robes. Harry's magic was growing. Not gradually, the way the professors expected, but in surges, sudden leaps in power that surprised everyone, himself most of all. In charms, he'd been practicing the summoning charm, an advanced piece of magic that wasn't on the first-year curriculum but that Fleur had introduced during their study sessions because she was, in her words, tired of watching him struggle with basics when his power wanted to run. "Accio quill," Harry said. The quill flew across the room. So did every other quill in the study hall. 27 quills ripped free of fingers, inkwells, and pencil cases and hurtled toward Harry's outstretched hand, forming a bristling bouquet that he caught more out of reflex than intention. Fleur stared. Luke, 3 tables over, stared. "I said one quill," Harry said weakly. "Your power isn't the problem," Fleur said, recovering first. "Your control is. You're broadcasting, sending the spell out like a shout instead of a whisper." She plucked her quill from his bundle and brushed off the ink. "Try again. This time, picture one quill. Not the word. The specific object. Harry tried. The single quill trembled, lifted, and floated, cleanly, precisely, into his hand. How did you know that would work? Because your magic responds to imagery, not language. That's unusual. Most wizards cast verbally, the incantation shapes the spell. You seem to cast visually. The words just aim it. Fleur looked thoughtful. My grandmother was the same. Vila magic is image-based. It's one of the reasons wand casting doesn't come naturally to us. Are you saying I cast like a Vila? I'm saying your magic is weird, Potter. Don't let it go to your head. But she was looking at him differently after that. Not with the grudging tolerance of a tutor stuck with a bad student. With genuine curiosity. Harry's magic didn't behave the way textbook said it should, and Fleur, who had spent her whole life navigating the gap between textbook magic and the reality of her Vila blood, recognized something in that. The following Tuesday, Harry was leaving the library when he felt it. A burning in his scar. Not the faint prickling he'd felt at night, this was sharp, sudden, like someone pressing a lit match to his forehead. He gasped, grabbed the wall, and the pain spiked, bright, blinding, accompanied by a flash of something that wasn't quite an image and wasn't quite a sound. A dark room. Whispering. Cold. Then it was gone. Harry stood in the corridor, breathing hard, his palm pressed to his scar. It throbbed once, twice, then settled. Potter? He turned. A girl from Ombrelun, small, dark-haired, with wide brown eyes, was watching him from the library doorway. You all right? You looked like you were about to fall over. I'm fine. Headache. She didn't look convinced, but she nodded and went back inside. Harry stood for another minute, waiting for the pain to return. It didn't. But the residue of that flash, the dark room, the whisper, stayed with him like the afterimage of a bright light. He went to Morel. The professor's office was in the north wing, behind a door that bore no nameplate. Harry knocked. It opened immediately. The scar, Morel said, looking at Harry's face. Come in. The office was sparse, a desk, a chair, shelves lined with books whose spines were dark with age. No personal items. No photographs. The only decoration was a map pinned to the far wall, old, hand-drawn, showing what looked like the floor plan of a building with multiple underground levels. Harry sat. Morel took the chair opposite, leaned forward, and studied the scar with the same clinical intensity as before. Describe it. Harry told him. The burning, the flash, the dark room, the whispering. Morel listened without interrupting. When Harry finished, the professor was very still. Have you told anyone else? No. Good. Don't. Morel stood and went to his shelves. He pulled down a book, heavy, bound in leather so dark it was nearly black, and set it on the desk. This scar is not a wound, Potter. Not in the conventional sense. It is a connection. A link between you and the magic that created it. Voldemort's magic. Yes. And links work in both directions. Morel opened the book to a marked page. The text was in Latin, the illustrations dark and disturbing, figures wreathed in shadow, diagrams of the human skull with lines of energy mapped across it. What you felt tonight was not a headache. It was a transmission. Something triggered the connection. Something on the other end moved. The words settled over Harry like cold water. You mean he's alive? I mean something of him persists. Whether that constitutes alive is a matter of considerable debate. Morel closed the book. I have been studying this type of magic for many years. It is old. Older than Hogwarts, older than Beauxbatons. It comes from an era when wizards believed they could cheat death. Did they? Some came close. The cost was significant. Morel met his eyes. I am telling you this because you need to understand what you carry. That scar is not a badge of honor. It is a door. And doors open from both sides. Harry felt cold. The office, despite its warming charms, felt smaller. What do I do? For now. Nothing. The connection appears dormant. What you felt was likely a tremor, not a breakthrough. But you must tell me if it happens again. Immediately. Morel paused. I am also going to suggest that you begin learning occlumency. What's that? The art of shielding your mind. If the connection activates fully, your thoughts, your memories, your emotions, all of it could be exposed. Occlumency builds a wall. He almost smiled. You are good at walls, aren't you, Potter? Harry left the office with a head full of questions and a hollow feeling in his chest. The corridor was empty, the palace quiet in the way it got late at night, when the stones themselves seemed to exhale. He was halfway to the soul-clad common room when he heard footsteps behind him. Light. Quick. Deliberate. He turned. Fleur was standing at the end of the corridor, arms crossed, expression sharp. You went to Morel's office, she said. How do you? I was in the library. I saw you leave looking like you'd seen a ghost, and then I watched you walk straight to the north wing. She came closer. What happened? Nothing. My scar, don't tell me nothing. You were white as paper. What did Morel say to you? Harry hesitated. Morel had said not to tell anyone. But Morel had also said the scar was a door, and standing here in the dark corridor, Fleur's blue eyes burning with a concern she'd kill him for acknowledging, Harry didn't want to carry this alone. My scar burned, he said. Morel thinks it's a connection. To Voldemort. To whatever's left of him. Fleur's expression didn't change, but her shoulders went rigid. Whatever's left of him, she repeated. He thinks something persists. Some kind of magic. The silence that followed was heavy. Fleur looked at the floor, at the wall, at the darkened windows. Then she looked at Harry. Come on, she said. Where? The terrace. You need air. And I need you to tell me everything. They sat on the fountain in the cold October night, and Harry told her. All of it, Morel's words, the book, the connection, occlumency. Fleur listened the way she did everything, with complete, focused intensity. He's right about one thing, she said when Harry finished. You need to learn to shield your mind. My grandmother could do it, it's a Vila discipline, different from wizard occlumency but the same principle. Mental barriers. Can you teach me? I'm 11. I know the theory, not the practice. She paused. But I can help you learn. The way I help with everything else, by not letting you do it badly. Harry almost laughed. Is that a yes? It's a conditional yes. You have to promise me something. What? Don't trust Morel completely. She held up a hand when Harry started to protest. I'm not saying he's lying. I'm saying he has his own reasons for being interested in your scar, and those reasons aren't entirely about protecting you. Did you see his office? The map on the wall? Harry nodded. That map is of Beauxbatons. The lower levels. The parts of the palace that have been sealed for centuries. Fleur's voice was low. He's looking for something down there, Harry. Something he thinks will fix what happened to his family. And he's using everything, every piece of dark magic knowledge, every connection, to find it. You think he's using me? I think he sees your scar as data. As proof of something he's been theorizing about for years. I think he cares about you, but I think he cares about his research more. She met his eyes. I've watched people my whole life, Potter. You learn to read faces when your own face makes everyone else go blank. Morel isn't a bad man. But he is a desperate one. Harry sat with that for a long time. The wind came down off the mountains, and the stars were cold and bright. "Why do you care?" he asked. Fleur blinked. "What?" "About this." "About me. 3 weeks ago you couldn't stand me." "I never said I couldn't stand you. I said I didn't volunteer to tutor you. You called my accent terrible." "Your accent is terrible." "Fleur." She exhaled. Looked away. When she spoke, her voice was smaller than he'd ever heard it. "Because no one else is going to tell you this. Everyone else sees the scar and the name and the story, and they either worship you or resent you. Nobody just tells you the truth." She looked back. "I know what that's like. Having everyone see the surface and nothing underneath." Harry held her gaze. The fountain was cold beneath them, and the night was vast, and they were 2 children carrying more than children should. "Partners, then," Harry said. "Not just for homework." Fleur was quiet. Then she held out her hand. "Partners." He shook it. Her grip was firm and warm. They walked back inside together, splitting at the staircase where Oberlin and Solclat diverged. Harry climbed to his common room, and Fleur climbed to hers, and neither of them looked back. But Harry slept better that night than he had since the scar burned. And when he dreamed, it wasn't of dark rooms and whispers. It was of a garden in the mountains, and a fountain that didn't work, and a girl who told him the truth when no one else would. In the morning, he woke early, dressed, and went to breakfast with his French textbook open in one hand. He sat at the Solclat table, poured coffee, he was getting used to the coffee, and began conjugating verbs under his breath. Avoir. J2 as Illinois A, New Savans. "Good morning," Luke said, dropping into the seat beside him. "You're studying before breakfast. Who are you and what have you done with Harry?" "Vous avez, ILS Ontario." Harry looked up and grinned. "I had a good teacher." Across the hall, at the Oberlin table, Fleur Delacour opened her own textbook and did not look in his direction. But she was smiling. It was a small thing. The kind of thing nobody else would notice. Harry noticed. He went back to his conjugations, his coffee growing cold, his wand warm in his pocket, and outside the tall windows of the great hall, the Pyrenees caught the first light of morning and held it, golden as the fire that had chosen him. Chapter 3, The Wild Hunt. November came to the Pyrenees like a fist. The mountains vanished behind walls of grey cloud, and the wind turned sharp enough to cut. Beauxbatons' enchanted corridors stayed warm, but the grounds were another matter, the gardens frosted over, the terraces became treacherous with ice, and the winged horses in the stables grew restless, stamping and snorting, their breath steaming in the cold. Harry barely noticed. He was too busy trying not to die. "Faster, Potter. You cast like a pensioner feeding pigeons." Madame Bissett, the flying instructor who had also, Harry had learned, once served as a combat trainer for the French Roier Corps, stood at the center of the training courtyard with her wand raised, hurling jinxes at him with the casual efficiency of someone lobbing tennis balls. Harry dodged, shielded, dodged again, and fired back a stunning spell that missed Bissett by a foot and shattered a clay pot against the wall. "Better aim, worse timing," Bissett said, deflecting his next spell without looking. "You telegraph your intentions. Your shoulder drops before you cast. I can read you like a headline." Harry gritted his teeth and tried again. This time he kept his shoulder still, let the intention build in his chest instead of his arm, and fired. Bissett blocked it, but her feet slid back an inch on the cobblestones. She looked down at her boots, then up at Harry. A slow smile spread across her weathered face. "There," she said. "That's what I wanted. Do it again." Harry had been training with Bissett twice a week since October, separate from regular classes. She'd approached him after a particularly dramatic incident in defense. Harry had accidentally blasted a practice dummy through the classroom wall during a disarming exercise, and offered private sessions. "You have power like a river in flood," she told him bluntly. "Plenty of force, no banks. Without control, you'll drown yourself and everyone around you. I can teach you the banks. It was grueling work. Bissett didn't believe in theory, she believed in doing things wrong until you did them right, which meant Harry spent most sessions bruised, exhausted, and occasionally singed. But it was working. His spells were getting tighter, his reflexes sharper, his ability to modulate between a whisper and a shout steadily improving. The practicum is next week, Bissett said as they finished. She tossed Harry a towel, which he caught one-handed. You ready? Depends. What exactly is the practicum? Survival exercise. 3 days in the mountain grounds. Paired teams. Navigation, foraging, defensive spellwork under pressure. Bissett gave him a look that was half assessment, half warning. The mountains don't care about your reputation, Potter. They'll eat a famous wizard as fast as an unknown one. Encouraging. Realistic. Who's your partner? Fleur Delacour. Bissett's eyebrows rose, but she said nothing beyond, good. She's sharp. Keep up with her. The practicum, L'Épreuve de Montagne, officially, was a Beauxbatons tradition dating back centuries. Every November, first-year students were sent into the enchanted mountain territory above the school in pairs, given a map, a compass, 3 days' worth of basic supplies, and a single objective, reach the summit cairn and return. The mountains were warded, dangerous enough to challenge, not dangerous enough to kill. In theory. In practice, Luke said, packing his bag in the Soulclat common room the night before departure, my brother said 2 students got lost for 5 days 3 years ago and had to be extracted by Bissett on a hippogriff. That's comforting. He also said the mountain trolls are mostly docile. Mostly. Luke grinned. You'll be fine. You've got Delacour. She's scarier than any troll. Harry threw a sock at him. They assembled at dawn on the lower terrace, 50 first-years in heavy cloaks, paired off, breath clouding in the freezing air. Professor Morel stood at the front, flanked by Bissett and de Roier. Morel looked like he hadn't slept. His eyes were deeper set than usual, the hollows beneath them purple dark, and there was a tension in his frame that hadn't been there before. The mountains are a classroom, Morel said, his voice carrying without amplification. But they are not a safe one. Inside the wards, you will encounter obstacles designed to test your judgment, your skill, and your partnership. The enchantments are calibrated to first-year ability. Do not go beyond the marked boundary stones. He paused, and his gaze swept the assembled students. It stopped, briefly, on Harry. If you encounter anything unusual, anything that feels wrong, fire red sparks. We will come. Fleur materialized beside Harry as the teams dispersed toward their starting positions. She wore her cloak pulled high against the cold, her silver blonde hair braided tight, her wand in her hand. She looked, Harry thought, like she'd been preparing for this her entire life. You have the map? She asked. Harry held it up. Hand-drawn, enchanted to show terrain but not their position, they'd have to navigate by landmark and compass. The route to the summit cairn was marked in red. It wound through forest, over a ridge, across a glacial stream, and up a steep final ascent. 3 days of hard walking. I've memorized the route, Fleur said. 2 possible approaches, the northern traverse is shorter but steeper, the southern loop is longer but follows the stream. I suggest south. Better water access, more shelter if the weather turns. Agreed. Also, I packed extra warming charms. Your circulation is terrible. My circulation is fine. You were shivering in the courtyard yesterday and it was only 5 degrees. I grew up in Surrey. 5 degrees is summer. Fleur almost smiled. Almost. Let's go. They walked. The first hours were beautiful in a brutal way. The forest above Beauxbatons was old, ancient, probably, with trees that had been growing since before the school existed. Pine and oak and something Harry didn't recognize, with silver bark and leaves that chimed faintly in the wind. The path was clear enough, winding uphill through undergrowth that crunched with frost. Fleur set a pace that was faster than Harry expected and didn't slow down. She navigated with quiet competence, checking the compass against landmarks, a distinctive rock formation here, a lightning-struck tree there, and making small adjustments to their heading without consulting Harry. It wasn't rudeness, he realized. It was efficiency. She'd studied the route and she knew it, and wasting time discussing it would be exactly that, a waste. Harry kept up. Bissett's training had built his endurance, and the months of proper food at Beauxbatons, after a lifetime of deadly scraps, had put weight on his frame. He wasn't strong, exactly, but he was wiry and stubbornness counted for a lot on a mountainside. They stopped for lunch by the stream, which was ice-cold and clear as glass. Fleur produced sandwiches from her pack, she'd prepared them herself, which surprised Harry until he remembered that she was, beneath the poise and the sharp tongue, an 11-year-old girl who'd grown up in a family, with a mother who probably taught her practical things. The thought sent a pang through his chest that he carefully ignored. "Your stamina is better than I expected," Fleur said, biting into her sandwich. "High praise. I expected you to slow down after the first hour. Most boys would. Most boys didn't grow up running from their cousin." Fleur looked at him. Harry looked at the stream. "Your cousin," she said carefully. "Dudley. He was big. And fast, for his size. He liked to chase me. It was a game for him." Harry picked up a stone and skipped it across the water. It bounced 3 times. "I got good at running." Fleur was quiet for a moment. "My sister Gabrielle, she's 7, she used to hide behind me when the older children at our village were cruel. They called her a monster. Because sometimes, when she was angry, her hands would change. Become talons. She looked at her own hands. Mine did too, when I was young. I learned to control it. She hasn't yet." "Is that a Vila thing?" "It's an us thing. Vila transformation is triggered by strong emotion. When we're afraid, or angry, our bodies shift toward the other shape. The one the textbooks call monstrous." Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it. "An old hurt, scarred over but not healed. I spent years learning to suppress it. To be normal. Perfect. Controlled. Because the alternative was being called what Renaud calls me." Harry set down his sandwich. "You're not a monster, Fleur. I know that. Do you?" Their eyes met. Fleur held his gaze for a long moment, and Harry saw something behind the composure, a flicker of the girl who'd hidden her sister behind her back and faced down a cruelty she couldn't fight with magic. "We should keep moving," Fleur said. "We're behind schedule." They walked. The afternoon grew colder. The forest thinned as they climbed, the trees spacing out, the undergrowth giving way to rock and scrub. The stream curved away to the east, and they followed the compass northwest, toward the ridge. Harry's scar prickled. Not the burning sensation from Morel's office, just a faint, itching tingle, like a mosquito bite remembering itself. He rubbed it absently and kept walking. The ridge came into view as the sun dropped behind the mountains, casting everything in shades of amber and gray. They set up camp in a sheltered hollow just below the ridgeline. Fleur conjured a warming charm that turned the air around them balmy, and Harry built a fire the Muggle way, with sticks and friction, because something about being on a mountain made him want to do things with his hands. "You know, you could just use incendio," Fleur said, watching him struggle with the fire bow. "I know. It would take approximately 2 seconds. I know. You're going to get a blister." "I know, Fleur." She sat back and let him work. When the fire finally caught, small, smoky, but real, she said nothing. But she moved closer to it, and that was acknowledgement enough. They ate. The sun set. The stars came out, more stars than Harry had ever seen, a spill of white across the black, so vivid it didn't look real. "Do you miss England?" Fleur asked. Harry thought about it honestly. "No. I miss the idea of it, sometimes. Having a place that's yours. But England was never really mine. It was the Dursleys' house and Dudley's room and the cupboard. None of that was mine. And Beauxbatons? Getting closer. He poked the fire with a stick. I've always been here. My family is 20 minutes from the school. My parents are both Beauxbatons alumni." She drew her knees up. "Sometimes that makes it harder. Everyone expects me to be exactly like my mother. Elegant. Controlled. The perfect part villa, enough to be exotic, not enough to be threatening. And you're more than that. Obviously. But the word was soft, not sharp. I just wish more than that didn't scare people." The fire crackled. Somewhere in the dark, an owl called. "For what it's worth," Harry said, "you don't scare me." Fleur looked at him. The firelight caught her eyes and turned them gold. "Give it time," she said, and Harry couldn't tell if she was joking. They took shifts sleeping. Fleur first, Harry second. He sat by the fire with his wand in his lap and listened to the mountain, the wind, the distant sound of the stream, the rustle of things moving in the dark that were probably just animals and were definitely not trolls, no matter what Luke's brother said. His scar prickled again. Stronger this time. Harry pressed his thumb to it and focused, the way Morel had taught him in their single occlumency session. Picture a wall, a door, a barrier between you and whatever's on the other side. The prickling faded. But it left a residue, a taste in the back of his mind like metal. He didn't sleep well when his shift came. His dreams were fragmented, dark corridors, a door that wouldn't open, a voice speaking words he couldn't understand. He woke with the scar tingling and Fleur shaking his shoulder. "Dawn," she said. "We need to move." The second day was harder. The ridge crossing was exposed, no trees, no shelter, just bare rock and wind that hit them like a wall. Harry cast a shield charm and held it for 40 minutes, angled against the gale, while Fleur navigated with the compass pressed against her chest to keep the wind from ripping it away. They couldn't talk. The wind stole every word. They came down the other side into a valley Harry hadn't expected. The map showed forest, dense, old-growth pine. What they found was something else. The trees were dead. Not bare for winter, dead. Gray trunks stripped of bark, branches like bones, the ground beneath them black and lifeless. No birds. No insects. No sound at all except the wind. Fleur stopped. Harry stopped beside her. "This isn't right," she said. "The map shows forest. Living forest. This is," she touched the nearest tree trunk. Pulled her hand back. "There's no magic in them. None. These trees have been completely drained." Harry looked around. The dead zone stretched in every direction, filling the valley floor. The boundary was sharp, living forest on one side, dead trees on the other, with a line between them as clean as a knife cut. What drains magic from trees? Nothing that should be inside the school wards. Fleur's wand was in her hand, her eyes scanning the dead forest. "We should go around. That'll add hours. Better than hours than walking into something we can't handle." She was right. Harry knew she was right. But something, a feeling, instinct, the same gut pull that had told him to trust de Roier on the rock, made him look deeper into the dead zone. At the center, barely visible through the gray trunks, he could see something. A shape. Dark, low to the ground, unmoving. "Fleur. Look." She followed his gaze. Stiffened. "That's not part of the practicum," she said. "How do you know?" "Because it's moving." It wasn't obvious at first. The shape was dark enough to blend with the dead trees, and it moved slowly, but it was moving, a fluid, crawling motion that reminded Harry of something he couldn't name. Then it shifted direction, and a gap in the trees gave him a clear view, and his blood went cold. It was the size of a large dog, but it wasn't a dog. It had too many legs, 6, maybe 8, dark and jointed, moving with an insectal precision that was deeply, fundamentally wrong. Its body was a mass of shadow, not solid in any way Harry understood, the edges blurred and shifted, as though it was made of smoke given just enough form to hold together. And where its face should have been, there were no features. Just a smooth, dark surface that turned toward them as they watched. "Run," Fleur said. They ran. The dead forest was a nightmare to navigate, fallen trunks, root systems jutting from the earth like ribs, ground that crumbled underfoot. Harry heard the thing behind them, not footsteps, exactly, but a sound, a dry, whispering rush like leaves blown across pavement, growing louder. "What is it?" Harry gasped. "I don't know." "Keep running." They broke out of the dead zone and into living forest, and Harry expected the thing to stop. It had stayed in the drained trees, hadn't it? It lived there, fed there, the whispering sound followed them. Fleur spun, wand raised. Stupefix. Red light hit the creature and passed through it. Literally through it. The spell struck a tree behind the thing and blew the trunk apart in a shower of splinters. The creature didn't slow. "Spells go through it." Fleur shouted. "Fire." Harry pointed his wand. "Incendio." A jet of flame roared from his wand, more than he'd intended, fueled by adrenaline, a column of fire that engulfed the creature entirely. For a second, it stopped. The shadowy form writhed inside the flames, and Harry thought, yes, it's working. Then the fire died. Didn't burn out. Died. Like someone had turned off a switch. The flames went from roaring inferno to nothing in a heartbeat, and the creature surged forward, faster now, and Harry felt the air around it change, felt the magic in his own body pull toward it, like something was trying to suck it out through his pores. "It eats magic," he said. "That's what killed the trees. It drains magic." Fleur's face went white. For Avila, for someone whose magic was woven into her blood, her bones, her very existence, a creature that ate magic was something beyond dangerous. It was an existential threat. "Red sparks," Fleur said. "Now." Harry raised his wand. Periculum. Red sparks shot upward, 3 of them, bright against the morning sky. The distress signal. Help would come. But not fast enough. The creature lunged. Harry shoved Fleur sideways and threw himself in the opposite direction. The thing passed between them, its shadow body brushing Harry's arm, and where it touched him, the cold was extraordinary, not temperature cold, but absence cold. His magic recoiled, contracted, pulled inward. For a terrifying second, Harry couldn't feel his wand. Then it passed, and the feeling flooded back, and Harry rolled to his feet with his heart slamming against his ribs. "It touched me," he said. "I couldn't feel my magic, don't let it touch you again." Fleur was on her feet, her wand out, but she wasn't casting. She was thinking. Harry could see it, the rapid calculation behind her eyes, the same focused intensity she brought to their study sessions, applied now to the problem of survival. "Spells go through it," she said, "rapid fire. Fire gets absorbed. It drains magic on contact. It's made of shadow, it's not solid, not fully, so we can't fight it. We can't fight it magically." She looked at him. "You built a fire with your hands last night." Harry stared at her. Then understood. The creature was circling back, that whispering rush growing louder. Harry dropped his wand, it felt like cutting off a hand, and grabbed a fallen branch. Thick, heavy, solid oak. Not magical. Just wood. "Draw it toward me," he said. "Harry, trust me." Fleur raised her wand and sent a cascade of silver sparks into the air, not a spell, just light, pure magical energy. The creature's featureless face turned toward it like a dog smelling meat. It surged toward Fleur. She ran. Not away from Harry, past him, close enough that the wind of her passage touched his face. The creature followed, drawn by the blaze of her magic, and Harry stepped into its path and swung the branch with everything he had. The impact was solid. Real. The branch connected with the creature's body and met resistance, not much, but enough. The thing screamed, not with a voice, but with the sound of 1,000 whispers rising to a shriek, and recoiled. Its shadow form rippled, destabilized, the edges fraying. Again. Fleur shouted. Harry swung again. The branch caught the creature across what might have been its midsection, and this time the destabilization was worse, the shadow unraveled, pulling apart like smoke in wind. The creature tried to reform, tried to pull itself together, and for a second it managed it. Then Fleur did something Harry had never seen. She lowered her wand. Closed her eyes. And the air around her changed. It wasn't a spell. There was no incantation, no wand movement. It was older than that, deeper, something that came from her blood, from the Vila fire that burned in her lineage. The temperature spiked. The air shimmered. And from Fleur's outstretched hands, a light bloomed, not wand light, not spell light, but something golden and fierce and alive, like the heart of a flame given form. The creature recoiled. The whisper became a wail. Now, Harry. Harry dropped the branch, scooped up his wand, and did the only thing he could think of. He didn't cast a spell. He channeled, pushed his magic out raw, unformed, the same flood of power that had sent feathers through ceilings and practiced dummies through walls. No incantation. No intention except go away. His magic hit Fleur's light, and the two forces merged. The explosion was silent. A wave of golden-white energy rolled outward from where they stood, and the creature, caught in its center, came apart. Not slowly. Instantly. The shadow dissolved, the whisper cut off, and the thing was simply gone. Scattered. Unmade. Harry's knees buckled. He hit the ground hard, gasping, his vision swimming. Beside him, Fleur staggered, caught herself on a tree trunk, and slid down it until she was sitting. They looked at each other. Breathing hard. Alive. What, Harry said between breaths, was that? I have absolutely no idea. Fleur's composure was gone, her hair had come loose from its braid, her cheeks were flushed, her eyes wide. She looked, Harry thought distantly, like a real person instead of a statue. The light, that was my Vila fire. I've never manifested it like that before. My grandmother can, but I've never. It worked. It worked because of you. Your magic amplified it. Like a lens focusing sunlight. She stared at her hands. That shouldn't be possible. Vila fire and wand magic don't combine. They're different systems. Different sources. We just proved otherwise. The sound of hoofbeats interrupted them. Beauxbatons appeared on the back of a hippogriff, landing hard in the clearing, her wand drawn and her face set for battle. She took in the scene, 2 winded first years, a scorch mark on the ground where the creature had been, the dead forest beyond, and her expression shifted from combat ready to deeply alarmed. What happened? They told her. Beauxbatons listened without interrupting, her face growing graver with every word. When they finished, she sent a Patronus, a silver hawk, streaking back toward the school. That creature shouldn't have been inside the wards, she said. Nothing that feeds on magic should be able to penetrate the boundary enchantments. They've stood for 800 years. What was it? Fleur asked. From your description, an obscurial fragment. Or something like it. Shadow entities that form where concentrated magic has been violently extinguished. Beauxbatons shook her head. But those are vanishingly rare. They don't just appear. Something created the conditions for it. The dead zone, Harry said. The drained trees. Something sucked the magic out of that valley. Or someone. Bissot's jaw tightened. I'm pulling you both from the practicum. You're going back to the school. We're fine, Harry started. You just fought something that a seventh year would struggle with, using a method that, as far as I know, has never been documented. You are not fine. You are extraordinary, and you are going back to the school. She flew them back on the hippogriff. Harry sat in front, Fleur behind him, her arms around his waist because there was no other way to stay on. Neither of them mentioned it, then or ever. The school was in an uproar by the time they landed. Bissot had sent word ahead, and Maxime herself was waiting on the terrace, her face a mask of controlled concern. Morel was beside her. He looked at Harry with an expression that was impossible to read, relief, calculation, and something darker, something that lived in the deep-set hollows of his eyes. My office, Maxime said. Both of you. Now. They told the story again. Maxime listened, her enormous hands folded on the desk, her face betraying nothing. Morel stood by the window, still and silent. When they finished, Maxime turned to Morel. Professor. Your assessment. A shadow entity, as Madame Bissot suggested. Likely a nocturne, a magical parasite that forms in areas of severe magical depletion. Morel's voice was level, academic. The question is not what it was. The question is what depleted the magic in that valley to begin with. And do you have an answer? Not yet. He turned from the window. His eyes found Harry's scar, held for a beat, then moved on. But I intend to find one. After they were dismissed, Maxime asked Harry to stay behind. Fleur waited in the corridor. Harry, Maxime said, and her voice was different now, softer, the headmistress giving way to something more personal. You fought well today. Both of you did. I want you to know that. Thank you, madam. I also want you to know that what happened, the creature, the dead zone, is not normal. In my 30 years at this school, nothing like this has occurred inside the wards. She paused. There will be an investigation. The wards will be reinforced. But I cannot guarantee your safety if I do not understand the threat. I understand. There is one more thing. Maxime hesitated, and Harry saw something he hadn't expected, uncertainty. Albus Dumbledore arrives tomorrow. Harry's stomach dropped. What? He wrote to me 3 days ago requesting a visit. I had intended to discuss it with you before his arrival, but events have accelerated. She met his eyes. He will want to speak with you. He will, almost certainly, ask you again to come to Hogwarts. I want you to know, whatever you decide, I will support it. I've already decided. I told you, I want to stay. Then tell him that. Maxime's smile was tired but genuine. You have earned the right to choose, Harry. Don't let anyone take it from you. Harry left the office and found Fleur leaning against the corridor wall, arms crossed, waiting. What did she say? Dumbledore's coming tomorrow. Fleur's expression hardened. Of course he is. They walked together through the palace corridors, the late afternoon light slanting through the windows. Harry's body ached from the morning's ordeal, and his scar was prickling again, faintly, persistently, like a warning he couldn't decode. Fleur. What? That thing we did. In the forest. When your fire and my magic combined. What about it? Has it been on your mind all day? Obviously. It violates 3 fundamental principles of magical theory. I've been thinking about it since it happened. Me too. Harry paused. Do you think we could do it again? Fleur looked at him sideways. Why? Because if there are more of those things out there, or something worse, I want to know we can fight them. Fleur was quiet for several steps. Then, after dinner. The terrace. Bring your wand. She turned down the Omberlin corridor without looking back. Luke was waiting in the Solclat common room with the expression of someone who'd heard a spectacular rumor and needed immediate confirmation. You fought a shadow monster on the mountain. Word travels fast. Did you really hit it with a stick? It was a branch. Harry Potter. The boy who lived. Defeated a dark creature with a branch. Luke's grin was enormous. They're going to write songs about you. Please don't. Too late. Beaumont, third verse, already composing. Harry threw a cushion at him, and Luke caught it, and for a few minutes everything was normal, just two boys laughing in a common room, the weight of the day temporarily set aside. But that evening, after dinner, Harry found himself on the third terrace with his wand in his hand and Fleur standing across from him, and normalcy was the last word he'd use. The principle, Fleur said, all business, is resonance. My Vila fire operates on emotional frequency, it responds to feeling, not incantation. Your magic seems to work the same way. When we were in the forest, we were both terrified. The same emotion, the same intensity. Our magic synchronized. So we need to feel the same thing at the same time. Essentially. The question is whether we can do it deliberately, without a monster trying to eat us. They tried. Fleur summoned her fire, Harry saw the effort it cost her, the way her jaw clenched and her hands trembled before the golden light bloomed between her palms. He pushed his own magic outward, raw and unformed, trying to match her frequency. Nothing happened. They tried again. And again. For an hour, they stood on the terrace under the stars, pushing magic at each other like two people shouting across a canyon, and nothing connected. This isn't working, Fleur said, frustration sharpening her voice. In the forest, it was instinct. Trying to recreate instinct through repetition is, like trying to make lightning strike the same place twice. Exactly. Harry sat down on the fountain's edge. Fleur sat beside him. Closer than usual, the efforts had drained them both, and exhaustion eroded the careful distance she usually maintained. What were you feeling? Harry asked. In the forest. Right before it worked. Afraid. Angry. Determined not to die in a valley full of dead trees. What else? Fleur hesitated. I was thinking about Gabrielle. My sister. If that thing had gotten past the wards, gotten to the school, she could visit next year, she stopped. I was thinking about protecting someone. Me too. Harry looked at his hands. I was thinking about you. That the thing was coming for you because your magic drew it, and I had to stop it. The admission hung between them. Fleur didn't react visibly, but the air shifted, something subtle, a change in pressure, like the moment before a storm breaks. Try again, she said quietly. But this time, don't think about power. Think about why. Harry stood. Fleur stood. They faced each other. He thought about Fleur. About the girl who hid her sister behind her back. About blue ink on essay margins and a smile that appeared so rarely it felt like catching a shooting star. About standing on a fountain in the dark and being told the truth. Fleur's fire bloomed. Harry's magic reached for it. This time, when they touched, the world rang like a bell. The resonance was brief, a flash of golden white light, a pulse of warmth, a sound that wasn't quite a sound but lived in the chest rather than the ears. It lasted maybe 3 seconds. Then it faded, and they were standing on the terrace, breathing hard, and the stars were very bright. That was real, Harry said. That was real, Fleur agreed. She was staring at her hands as though they belonged to someone else. What do we call it? I don't know. I don't think it has a name. She looked up. But we don't tell anyone. Not yet. Not until we understand it. Agreed. They stood in the dark, the remnants of whatever they'd just done still humming in the air between them, and Harry felt the world shift on its axis, just slightly, just enough. Something had changed. Something had started. He went to bed that night and dreamed of golden light. The scar didn't prickle at all. Dumbledore arrived at noon the following day. Harry saw the carriage from the soul-clad common room window, not a Beauxbatons carriage, pulled by winged horses, but something older and simpler. A black carriage drawn by thestrals, which Harry couldn't see but Luke, who'd watched his grandfather die the previous summer, described in an uncomfortable whisper. Skeletal horses. Wings like bats. You can only see them if you've seen someone die. Luke shuddered. Cheerful way to travel. The carriage landed on the main lawn. A figure stepped out, tall, thin, with a beard that reached his waist and robes of deep purple. Even from the window, 4 stories up, Harry could feel the presence. It was like the man carried his own gravity. "That's him," Luke said. "That's Dumbledore." Behind Dumbledore, a second figure emerged, a woman, stern-faced, in emerald green robes with a pointed hat. She looked around the Beauxbatons grounds with the expression of someone cataloging differences and finding them wanting. "McGonagall," Luke said. "Deputy Headmistress of Hogwarts. My mother said she turns into a cat." "Everyone keeps saying," my mother said. "Does your mother know everything?" "Pretty much, yeah." Maxime met them on the lawn. Harry watched the handshake, Maxime towering over Dumbledore, Dumbledore showing no sign of noticing. They spoke briefly, then walked inside together. McGonagall followed, her back straight as a wand. The summons came an hour later. A prefect knocked on the common room door and told Harry he was wanted in the headmistress's office. He went alone. They were waiting for him, Maxime behind her desk, Dumbledore and McGonagall in conjured chairs, normal-sized, which looked absurd against Maxime's furniture. Roier stood by the window, arms folded. Dumbledore rose when Harry entered. He was older than Harry had expected. Not in a frail way, there was nothing frail about the eyes behind those half-moon spectacles, which were sharp and bright and deeply, intensely blue. But his age showed in the lines of his face and the careful way he moved, as though conserving energy for things that mattered. "Harry," he said. His voice was warm. "I've wanted to meet you for a very long time. Professor Dumbledore. Please, sit." Harry sat. Dumbledore studied him, not the way Morel did, clinically, cataloging data, but the way you might look at something precious that had been lost and unexpectedly found. "You look remarkably like your father," Dumbledore said. "Except the eyes. You have your mother's eyes." Harry's throat tightened. Nobody had ever told him he looked like his parents. The Dursleys never spoke of them. "You knew them?" "I did. Very well. Your father was one of the most talented students Hogwarts ever produced. Your mother was the brightest witch of her generation." Dumbledore paused. "They would be proud of you, Harry. What you've accomplished here, learning a new language, adapting to a foreign culture, fighting a shadow creature on a mountainside, they would be extraordinarily proud." The words hit Harry harder than he expected. He'd been told he was talented, capable, exceptional. Nobody had told him his parents would be proud. "Thank you," he managed. "I want to be honest with you," Dumbledore said, leaning forward. "When I learned that Beauxbatons had recruited you, I was concerned. Not because Beauxbatons is not an excellent school. It is. Madame Maxime is a formidable headmistress." A nod to Maxime, who inclined her head. "But your parents were Hogwarts students. Your father's family attended Hogwarts for generations. There is a history there, a legacy, that I believe matters." "With respect, Professor," Harry said, "I didn't know about that legacy until 3 months ago. I didn't know about any of it. And that," Dumbledore said gently, "is my failing. I placed you with the Dursleys because there were protections, ancient, powerful protections tied to your mother's sacrifice, that kept you safe as long as you lived with her blood relative. I monitored you from a distance. I believed you were adequate. Adequate, Harry repeated. The word tasted sour. I was wrong. The admission was simple, unadorned. I prioritized safety over happiness, and the result was a childhood I deeply regret. I cannot undo that. But I can offer you something now. He reached into his robes and produced an envelope, heavy parchment, sealed with red wax. The Hogwarts crest. A place at Hogwarts. Immediate transfer. You would join the first-year class, catch up quickly, you're clearly capable, and be among your parents' people. Harry looked at the envelope. Then at Maxime, whose face was carefully neutral. At de Roier, whose arms were still folded. At McGonagall, who was watching him with an expression that was both hopeful and something else, something that looked like guilt. Professor Dumbledore, Harry said. Can I ask you something? Of course. If things had gone the way you planned, if I'd gotten my Hogwarts letter, gone to Hogwarts, never heard of Beauxbatons, would you have told me about my parents? About Voldemort? About the scar? Dumbledore was quiet. It was a long silence, the kind that had weight. In time, he said. When I judged you were ready. When you judged. Harry let that sit. Not when I asked. Not when I needed to know. When you decided. Harry, I've spent my whole life with people deciding things for me. What I eat, where I sleep, what I'm allowed to know. The Dursleys decided I didn't deserve magic. You decided I didn't deserve the truth. Harry's voice was steady, but something burned behind it. Madame Maxime didn't decide anything for me. She offered, and I chose. That's the difference. The room was silent. Dumbledore's blue eyes glistened behind his spectacles, not with tears, exactly, but with something close. You are very like your mother, he said quietly. She had the same gift for finding the precise word that cut deepest. I'm not trying to cut. No. You're trying to be honest. And you're right. Dumbledore folded his hands. I cannot argue with a young man who knows his own mind. It would be disrespectful to try. He stood. McGonagall stood beside him, her lips pressed thin, her eyes bright. The offer remains open, Dumbledore said. Today, tomorrow, next year. Hogwarts will always have a place for you, Harry. But I will not ask again. He held out his hand. Harry shook it. Dumbledore's grip was firm and warm and very, very old. One more thing, Dumbledore said, pausing at the door. The creature you encountered on the mountain. I would be grateful if Madame Maxime shared the details of the investigation with me. Not for political reasons, for practical ones. If something is breaching ancient wards, it may not be confined to Beauxbatons. Maxime nodded. You will have my full report. Thank you. Dumbledore's gaze returned to Harry one last time. Be careful, Harry. The world is changing. And you are more important to that change than you yet understand. He left. McGonagall followed, pausing just long enough to give Harry a look that said, clearly, I understand why you stayed, but I wish you hadn't. Then the door closed, and they were gone. Harry exhaled. Well, de Roier said from the window. That went better than expected. Harry found his friends in the courtyard afterward, and it struck him, with a warmth that caught him off guard, that the word friends applied now. Not just Luke. Not just Fleur. The practicum had changed things. Word of the shadow creature had spread through the school with the speed of wildfire, and Harry and Fleur's survival, their victory, had redrawn the social map. Students who'd ignored Harry now sought him out. Students who'd dismissed Fleur now gave her a wide, respectful berth. Two of them became more than acquaintances. Elise Marchand was a Papillombre first year, slight, dark-eyed, with a wicked sense of humor and a gift for transfiguration that bordered on prodigious. She'd approached Fleur in the library the day after the mountain incident, not with the glassy-eyed worship of the Vila affected or the cold distance of the prejudiced, but with a straightforward question: is it true you killed a shadow monster with your bare hands? Not bare hands, Fleur had said. And not killed. Dispersed. Cool. I'm Elise. Want to study together? The bluntness had disarmed Fleur so completely that she'd said yes before processing the question. The other was Tariq Ben Ali, a Solklat first year from Morocco who spoke 4 languages, played the oud, and had a quiet, steady confidence that made him the calmest person in any room. He'd been partnered with Luke for the practicum, they'd completed the full 3 days without incident, and had gravitated toward Harry's orbit with the unhurried certainty of someone who chose his friends carefully and stuck with them. The 5 of them sat in the courtyard that afternoon: Harry, Fleur, Luke, Elise, Tariq, and for the first time, Harry felt what he imagined other children had always felt. The ease of belonging. The comfort of people who knew your name and wanted you there. Dumbledore came to steal you away, Luke said. The whole school's talking about it. Did he offer you Hogwarts? Yeah. And? I said no. Obviously, Fleur said. She was sitting on the courtyard wall, her legs crossed, reading a book with the kind of aggressive concentration that suggested she wasn't actually reading at all. He was never going to say yes. How do you know? Elise asked. Because he chose us. Fleur looked up from her book. Didn't you, Potter? Harry met her eyes. Something passed between them: acknowledgement, partnership, the shared memory of golden light on a mountaintop. Yeah. I chose you. The words came out simpler and more honest than he'd intended. Luke raised his eyebrows. Elise hid a smile. Tariq said nothing but looked quietly pleased. Fleur returned to her book. But the tips of her ears were pink, and Harry noticed, and he said nothing, and the afternoon sun was warm. Later, much later, after dinner, after the castle had quieted and the corridors emptied, Harry found himself unable to sleep. The conversation with Dumbledore replayed in his head. You are more important to that change than you yet understand. He got up, pulled on a jumper over his pajamas, and walked. The palace at night was a different creature. The enchanted paintings slept in their frames, murmuring. The marble floors were silver in the moonlight. Harry's bare feet made no sound as he moved through corridors he was beginning to know by heart. He didn't intend to go to the north wing. But that's where his feet took him, down the corridor toward Morel's office, past the darkened classrooms, toward the end of the hall where a heavy oak door led to the restricted archives. The door was open. Not wide open. Cracked. A sliver of light from inside, flickering, casting a thin gold line across the floor. Harry stopped. Listened. Footsteps. Inside the archives. Moving quickly. And a sound he didn't recognize, stone scraping on stone, like something heavy being moved. Harry crept to the door and looked through the crack. The restricted archives were a long, vaulted room lined with shelves that held the oldest and most dangerous texts in Beauxbatons' collection. At the far end, barely visible in the light of a single floating candle, Professor Morel was on his hands and knees, running his fingers along the base of the wall. He found what he was looking for. His fingers pressed into a groove in the stone, and a section of the floor shifted, not opened, exactly, but became translucent, like glass replacing stone. Beneath the floor, Harry could see something, a staircase, descending into darkness. The air that rose from the opening was cold and old and carried a smell Harry recognized from the dead valley on the mountain. Absence. The smell of magic drained away. Morel stood. He stared down at the staircase for a long moment, his face illuminated by the floating candle, and Harry saw what was on it: not madness, not malice, but grief. Raw, unprocessed grief, the kind that drove people to impossible things. Then Morel pressed the stone again. The floor solidified. The staircase vanished. He straightened his robes, extinguished the candle, and turned toward the door. Harry ran. He made it around the corner and into a side corridor before Morel's footsteps reached the archive door. He pressed himself against the wall, heart hammering, and waited. The footsteps passed, heading the other direction, toward Morel's office, and faded. Harry stood in the dark corridor and breathed. The staircase. The smell. The dead valley on the mountain and the creature that shouldn't have been inside the wards. Something was beneath Beauxbatons. Something old, something sealed, something Morel had been looking for. And whatever it was connected to what had happened on the mountain. Harry was sure of it, not logically, not with evidence, but with the bone-deep certainty that had kept him alive for 11 years in a house that didn't want him. He needed to tell Fleur. He needed to tell Fleur, and they needed to be careful, and the world was darker and more complicated than it had been an hour ago. Harry went back to bed. He lay in the dark with his wand on the nightstand and the mountains outside his window and the knowledge of a hidden staircase burning in his mind like a coal. Sleep came eventually, thin and restless. In his dreams, a door opened underground, and something old breathed in the dark. Chapter 4, Silver Blood, was cut off mid-sentence. Let me continue it from exactly where it stopped and bring it to a proper close. Luke yawned enormously, his jaw cracking. I'm going to sleep for a week. Someone carry me. You have legs, Elise said. They've resigned. Send flowers. Tariq put a hand on Luke's shoulder and steered him toward the soul-clad staircase. Come on. One foot, then the other. Revolutionary concept. They peeled off one by one, Luke and Tariq up the east stairs, Elise toward the Papillombre wing with a wave and a muttered, never again, that nobody believed. Harry and Fleur stood alone at the junction, the silence of the palace pressing in around them. You should sleep, Fleur said. So should you. I will. In a moment. She leaned against the wall, and for the first time all night, the armor came off completely. Not a crack, not a gap, the whole thing, dropped at her feet. She looked tired and young and scared and fierce, all at once, and Harry understood that this was who Fleur Delacour was beneath the composure. Not a statue. A girl who felt everything and had simply learned, long before she should have needed to carry it without showing the weight. Morel's going to be all right, Harry said. He didn't know if it was true, but he believed it. Maxime isn't cruel. She'll be fair. I know. That's not what I'm thinking about. What, then? Fleur was quiet for a long moment. The torchlight caught the shadows under her eyes, the tension in her jaw. The door, she said. When you stood in front of it, your magic, I felt it, Harry. Through the resonance. Even before we'd started practicing tonight. I felt your magic reach for the flame, and the flame reach back. Like they were made for each other. That doesn't mean anything. It means everything, and you know it. She pushed off the wall and faced him. Whatever is behind that door, it's connected to you. And it's connected to me, to my blood, my heritage. The Vila carvings in those chambers, the fire imagery, my ancestors built that place. Or helped build it. The magic down there is partly mine. Ours, Harry corrected. Ours. She tested the word like she was tasting it. Morel spent 15 years trying to reach the flame. He's a brilliant wizard, decades of experience, immense knowledge, total dedication. And he couldn't do it. The wards rejected him. They're designed to reject him. She met Harry's eyes. But they didn't reject you. Or me. I felt the wards when we were down there, they were reading us, the way the sorting flame read us. And they let us pass. Harry had felt it too. The ward boundary, the circle of runes Elise had identified, had tingled when he crossed it, but it hadn't resisted. He'd assumed it was because the wards were weakened. But Fleur was right. Weakened wards would still resist unauthorized entry. They hadn't resisted. They'd welcomed. If Maxime's resealing works, Harry began. It'll hold the door closed. But the flame is still there. Still burning. Still waiting. Fleur's voice dropped. And whatever Morel stirred up, the dead zones, the shadow creatures, that damage doesn't vanish overnight. The mountain is wounded. The ward structure is fractured. Sealing the tunnels is a bandage, not a cure. You think we'll have to go back down? I think the choice is going to be made for us. Not tonight, not tomorrow. But soon. She touched his arm, brief, deliberate, her fingers cool against his sleeve. When it happens, I want us to be ready. We will be. You say that with a lot of confidence for someone who learned he was a wizard 4 months ago. 4 months ago, I lived in a cupboard. Now I live in a palace, I speak French badly, and I have a wand made of rosewood with a sphinx hair core that shoots spells hard enough to put practice dummies through walls. He shrugged. Confidence seems appropriate. Fleur's mouth twitched. Not a smile, the pre-smile, the one that lived in the muscles before the expression arrived. Harry had learned to read those the way astronomers read the sky, small movements that predicted larger ones. Good night, Harry, she said. Good night, Fleur. She walked toward the Omberlund stairs, her cloak trailing behind her, her back straight despite the exhaustion. At the top of the first landing, she paused and looked back. For the record, she said, your French has improved. You only made 2 grammatical errors in front of the ministry today. Only 2. I counted. It's progress. She turned away. Don't let it go to your head. Her footsteps faded up the staircase. Harry stood alone at the junction, the torches guttering low, the palace settling into its deep night quiet, and he let the evening wash over him, the tunnels, the door, the sealed flame, Morel's broken voice saying his wife's name. The ministry's probing questions and Maxime's steady hand. Fleur's fire and his own magic and the way they fit together like 2 halves of something that had been whole once, long ago, and was trying to remember how. He climbed the stairs to the soul-clad common room. The fire in the hearth had burned down to embers, and the room was dark and warm, and Luke's snoring was already audible through the dormitory door, a sound that had annoyed Harry in September and now felt like a kind of anchor. He sat on the windowsill. The mountains were invisible in the dark, but he knew they were there, massive, ancient, indifferent to the small dramas of the humans who lived in their shadow. Somewhere beneath those mountains, an eternal flame burned in a sealed chamber, waiting. Somewhere above, the stars turned in their slow, patient circles. And somewhere in his scar, the fragment of a dead man's magic prickled, faintly, like a reminder of a debt unpaid. Harry touched the scar. Pressed his thumb to it. Felt the familiar tingle, weaker tonight, actually, as though the resonance with Fleur had quieted it somehow. A temporary reprieve. He'd take it. He thought about Dumbledore's words, you are more important to that change than you yet understand, and about Maxime's, you have earned the right to choose, and about Morel, kneeling in the archive, pressing his fingers to the stone, reaching for the only thing he thought could fill the hole his family had left. Everyone was reaching for something. Dumbledore reached for control. Maxime reached for independence. Morel reached for a fire that could protect the world from loss. Harry reached for the windowsill, pulled himself up, and looked at the sky. He didn't know what he was reaching for yet. But he knew who was reaching beside him, and that was enough. For now, that was enough. He went to bed. The dormitory was warm, the sheets clean, the pillow soft. He slept without dreaming, deeply and completely, and when morning came, gray December light creeping through the windows, the first snow of the season falling in thick, silent flakes over the Pyrenees, he woke feeling something he hadn't felt in weeks. Rested. Clear. Ready. Whatever came next, he would face it. Not alone. Never alone again. The snow kept falling. The palace woke around him. And in the sealed depths beneath the stone, the eternal flame burned on, patient, ancient, waiting for the day when the right hands would reach for it and the right fire would answer. That day was coming. Harry could feel it the way you feel weather changing, a shift in pressure, a charge in the air, the certainty that what was gathering on the horizon would not pass them by. He dressed, pocketed his wand, and went down to breakfast. Chapter 5, Beneath the Palace. The wards broke on a Tuesday. Harry felt it before anyone told him, a shudder that ran through the palace like a tremor through bedrock, rattling the windows in their frames and sending the portraits swaying on their hooks. He was in Charm's class when it happened, practicing color change spells on a set of ceramic tiles, and the shudder knocked every tile off every desk and sent them shattering across the floor. Professor Valancourt caught herself on the edge of her desk, wand already in her hand, her eyes going to the ceiling as if she could see through it. "Everyone stay seated," she said. Her voice was calm. Her face was not. A second tremor. Deeper. The floating chandeliers in the classroom flickered, their enchanted flames stuttering, and Harry felt something in his chest lurch, not his heart, not his lungs, but his magic. As though something vast and structural had cracked, and every magical being in the building had felt the fracture through the ambient field. "That's the wards," Luke said beside him. His face had gone pale. "That's the actual wards." Valancourt was already at the door, speaking rapidly with a prefect who'd appeared in the corridor. She turned back to the class. "Everyone proceed to the great hall. Calmly and in order. Now." They filed out. The corridors were thick with students, all moving in the same direction, the controlled panic of a building emptying under duress. Harry pushed against the current, looking for Fleur. She found him first, appearing at his elbow in the stairwell, her face tight, her wand drawn. "The wards on the north wing collapsed," she said without preamble. "I felt it, the section directly above the archive entrance. The resealing didn't hold. Morel? Still confined. As far as I know." They reached the great hall. It was already filling, for houses converging, professors stationed at the doors, Maxime's voice carrying over the noise with the effortless authority of someone accustomed to commanding large rooms. "All students will remain in the great hall until further notice. Prefects, take attendance. Heads of house, report to me immediately." Harry and Fleur found Luke, Elise, and Tariq at the Soulclat table. The five of them clustered together while the hall buzzed with fear and speculation around them. "The ward collapse was localized," Tariq said. He'd been listening to two seventh-years discussing it behind him. "The north wing section specifically. But it's spreading, the adjacent wards are under strain. Because the ward network is interconnected," Fleur said. "One section fails, the load transfers to the neighboring sections, which weren't designed to bear it. If they don't stabilize the breach, it cascades," Elise finished. "Like dominoes." "How long?" Harry asked. "Hours. Maybe less." Harry looked toward the head table, where Maxime was in intense conversation with Severin and de Roier. Severin's face was carved from granite. De Roier kept glancing toward the doors. And there, at the edge of the group, Dumbledore. When had he arrived? Harry hadn't seen him enter, stood with his hands clasped behind his back, listening, his blue eyes grave. "Wait," Harry said. "Dumbledore's here." "He arrived this morning," Fleur said. "Maxime contacted him after your scar episodes worsened. He was supposed to meet with you this afternoon." "You knew about this?" "Maxime told me an hour ago. I was coming to find you when the wards broke." She met his eyes. "Harry, Dumbledore wants to examine your scar. He has theories about the connection, about what it is, what it means. He thinks the soul fragment. The words hung between them. Fleur's expression shifted, she hadn't meant to say it like that. The information had been meant for a quieter moment, a controlled disclosure. Not blurted out at a table in a hall full of panicking students. "What soul fragment?" Harry said. His voice was very level. Fleur closed her eyes briefly. "Dumbledore told Maxime. Maxime told me this morning because she wanted me prepared. Your scar, the connection to Voldemort, it's not just a magical link. It contains a piece of his soul. A fragment that broke off when the killing curse rebounded. The table was silent. Luke's mouth was open. Elise had gone white. Tarek's hand had stopped halfway to his cup. Harry sat very still. The noise of the great hall washed over him, hundreds of voices, the clatter of nervous energy, and none of it touched him. He was inside himself, in a quiet place, looking at the thing that had lived in his scar for 11 years and finally had a name. A soul fragment. A piece of Voldemort. In him. Part of him. Harry, Fleur said. I'm fine. You're not. I said I'm fine. He looked at her, and whatever she saw in his face made her stop pushing. Later. We deal with this later. Right now, the wards are falling apart. As if to punctuate his words, a third tremor shook the hall. Dust sifted from the ceiling. A first year at the Papillombre table screamed. The chandeliers swung, and for a sickening second the enchanted sky above them flickered, showing not the December gray outside but something darker, an absence, a void where the magic should have been. Maxime's voice cut through the noise like a blade. Silence. The hall obeyed. 500 students, every one of them terrified, went quiet. The ward breach is being contained, Maxime said. Senior staff are reinforcing the adjacent sections. There is no immediate danger. However, as a precaution, all students will remain here until the all-clear is given. She paused, and her gaze swept the room with the authority of a woman who'd spent 3 decades turning children into adults. You are Beauxbatons students. You do not panic. You endure. The silence held for a beat. Then someone at the soul-clap table, Harry never found out who, began to clap. Others joined. The applause spread, not frantic or forced but steady, resolute, the sound of a community reminding itself that it was a community. Maxime's jaw tightened. She turned back to her professors. The applause faded. And the work continued. An hour passed. Then 2. The tremors stopped, which should have been reassuring but felt ominous instead, like the silence after a storm that hasn't finished. Students played cards, studied, talked in low voices. The professors rotated in and out of the hall, their faces giving nothing away. Harry sat at the table and felt the scar. It was different now that he knew what it was. Not more painful, the same low throb it had been for weeks, but heavier. Darker. The knowledge changed the sensation the way knowing a shadow source changes how you see it. It wasn't just a connection anymore. It was an invasion. A piece of the man who'd murdered his parents, lodged in his skull, feeding on his magic like a parasite. He wanted to claw it out with his fingernails. Don't, Fleur said quietly. She was watching his hand, which had risen to his forehead without his permission. Whatever you're thinking, don't. He lowered his hand. Dumbledore approached their table at the end of the second hour. Up close, the old wizard looked different from his last visit, thinner, more urgent, the twinkle in his eyes dimmed by the gravity of the situation. He pulled a chair from the next table, sat, and regarded Harry with an expression that contained multitudes. Harry. I owe you a conversation that circumstances have rushed. Fleur told me. The soul fragment. Ah. Dumbledore's gaze flicked to Fleur, who met it without apology. Then the essential fact is known. We can dispense with preamble. He leaned forward, his voice pitched for their table alone. The fragment is the source of your connection to Voldemort. Your dreams, the pain in your scar, the voice, all symptoms of a soul that is not yours, embedded in magic that is. I have been studying this phenomenon for years. I believe it can be removed. How? The eternal flame. Its magic is purifying by nature, created specifically to protect, to cleanse, to separate darkness from light. If it can be accessed and channeled through compatible magic, through the resonance, Harry said. Our resonance. Yes. The fused magic you and Mademoiselle Delacour have developed is, as far as I can determine, the only force in existence that could interface with the flame and direct its power with the precision required. He paused. But the wards protecting the flame are failing. And therein lies our problem. Another tremor, gentler this time, but unmistakable. The chandeliers swayed. Students looked up. The ward collapse isn't random, Dumbledore continued. It's following the fracture lines Morel created during his years of probing. Each fracture weakens the system further, and the system's failure is accelerating. At the current rate, the sealed chamber will be exposed within hours. Exposed to what? To anything. To anyone. The eternal flame, uncontained and uncontrolled, will radiate its power outward through the broken ward network. In the best case, the palace becomes a beacon, visible to every magical being within 1,000 miles, drawing attention we cannot afford. In the worst case, the raw magical energy destabilizes the foundations of the school itself. The building collapses, Fleur said flatly. The building, the grounds, and a significant portion of the mountainside. The flame's power is not small, Mademoiselle Delacour. It kept Beauxbatons protected for 8 centuries. That much energy, released without direction, is catastrophic. The table was very quiet. So we go down, Harry said. We access the flame before the wards fail completely, and we, what? Reseal it? Control it? Control it. Channel its energy into the existing ward structure, reinforcing it from within rather than from without. Morel's approach, probing from the outside, was the worst possible method. The wards were designed to be maintained from the inside, by the flame itself, directed by compatible casters. And while we're at it, Harry said, we use the flame to remove the soul fragment. If the opportunity presents itself, yes. But the wards must be the priority. The school, the lives within it, come first. Dumbledore met his eyes. Can you do this? Harry looked at Fleur. She looked back. The communication was instant, wordless, not the resonance, but something simpler. Trust. We can do this, Fleur said. Dumbledore nodded. He stood, and the weight of his years showed for just a moment, a stiffness in his joints, a slowness in the rise, before the steel reasserted itself and he was Dumbledore again, ageless and unbreakable. Madame Maxime and I will accompany you into the tunnels. Capitaine Severin will maintain the upper wards. Professor de Roier will manage the evacuation. Evacuation? Luke said. Precautionary. In case we fail. Dumbledore said this with the matter-of-fact calm of a man who had looked at failure many times and survived it. Your friends may accompany us to the archive entrance, but no further. The deeper chambers are too dangerous for anyone not directly involved in the channeling. No, Luke said immediately. I'm going. Monsieur Beaumont, with respect, Professor, my best friend is about to walk into a collapsing tunnel system with a piece of Voldemort's soul in his head. I'm going. As am I, Elise said. And me, Tarek said. Dumbledore looked at them, 3 11-year-olds staring down the most powerful wizard in the world with the stubborn certainty of people who had already made their decision and were simply informing him of it. You remind me, Dumbledore said softly, of some people I once knew. They were similarly impossible to dissuade. He sighed. To the archive entrance. No further. And you follow every instruction without question. Agreed, Luke said. Then, to Harry, if you die down there, I'm going to kill you. Noted. They moved. Maxime cleared a path through the great hall, telling the other professors she was taking a small team to reinforce the north wing wards from below. It was technically true. It was also spectacularly understated. The north wing corridor was different from the last time Harry had walked it. The air hummed, not the gentle background vibration of a healthy magical building, but an unsteady, discordant buzz, like a machine running off balance. The walls themselves seemed to pulse, the stone sweating a faint luminescence where the ward enchantments bled through. "The ward bleed is accelerating," Maxime murmured to Dumbledore. "The archive section is fully compromised." The archive door stood open. Not forced, simply open, the wards that had sealed it dissolved like sugar in water. Inside, the room was dark. The floating candles from the resealing had gone out. Harry pulled his wand. Lumos. The light revealed the archives in disarray, books fallen from shelves, parchments scattered, the careful order of centuries disrupted by the magical tremors. At the far end, the hidden passage gaped in the floor, fully open, no longer needing a pressure trigger to reveal itself. The stone had simply given up the pretense. "The tunnels are accessible," Dumbledore said. "That means the deeper wards are also failing." "How much time do we have?" Fleur asked. "If the cascade continues at this rate, an hour. Perhaps 90 minutes before the sealed chamber is breached." "Then we go now." "Luke, Elise, Tariq," Maxime said. "You wait here. If the tremors worsen, if the building itself becomes unstable, you leave. You go to the Great Hall. You do not come after us." "Madame Maxime," Luke started. "That was not a request, Monsieur Beaumont." Luke's jaw clenched. He looked at Harry, and what passed between them was beyond words, the accumulated weight of 4 months of friendship, of laughter and arguments and shared meals and a night in the tunnels that had changed everything. "Come back," Luke said. "I will. Both of you." Harry clapped Luke's shoulder. Fleur gave Elise a look that communicated something private and female and entirely beyond Harry's ability to interpret. Tariq simply nodded, once, steady, the nod of someone who trusted the outcome because he trusted the people walking toward it. Then Harry and Fleur descended, with Dumbledore behind them and Maxime behind him, and the darkness swallowed them whole. The tunnels were alive. That was the only word for it. The last time Harry had walked these corridors, they'd been still, ancient, dusty, sleeping. Now they pulsed. The veins of mineral in the walls throbbed with light, cycling through colors in erratic patterns. The air was thick with magical charge, making Harry's skin tingle and his hair stand on end. The temperature fluctuated wildly, oven-hot one moment, freezing the next, as the collapsing ward system hemorrhaged energy. "Stay close," Dumbledore said. His wand was drawn, casting a light that cut through the chaos like a lighthouse beam. "The ward failure is creating pockets of unstable magic. If you step into one, the effects could be unpredictable." They moved quickly. Past the ward boundary, the rune circle in the floor, now dark, its magic spent, past the carved chambers, where the devotional images of Vila and Wizard seemed to writhe in the flickering light. The narrow passage beyond was worse. The walls had cracked, and through the cracks seeped a light that was too bright, too white, too concentrated, the eternal flame's energy, bleeding through rock, finding every fissure and fault. "The flame is destabilizing," Maxime said. She had to shout over a sound Harry was only now registering, a low, building roar, like a furnace running out of control. "Without the wards to contain it, the energy has nowhere to go. It's pressurizing. How long before it blows?" Harry shouted back. "Minutes. Not hours. We were wrong about the timeline." They ran. The corridor widened. The roar grew louder. And then they were there, the sealed door, the enormous carved stone with its thousands of runes, except it wasn't sealed anymore. The runes were dark, dead, their magic exhausted. Cracks ran through the stone like a shattered windshield, and through the cracks, white light poured, so intense it cast hard shadows on the tunnel walls. And standing in front of the door, one hand pressed to the crumbling stone, was Morel. Harry stopped. Everyone stopped. Morel looked like a man at the end of a very long road. His robes were disheveled, his face gaunt, his deep-set eyes burning with a feverish intensity that made Harry's stomach clench. He'd broken through his confinement, how, Harry couldn't guess, and he'd come here, to the place he'd spent 15 years trying to reach, and he was touching the door the way a drowning man touches shore. Emile. Maxime's voice was careful, steady. Step away from the door. Morel didn't turn. It's beautiful, Olympe. Can you feel it? The flame, it's so close. After all these years. The wards are failing. The flame is destabilizing. If you breach that door, if I breach this door, I can reach it. Channel it. Create the ward I've spent half my life designing. His voice cracked on the last word. A ward that never breaks. That protects everyone. Claire. Sophie. His hand pressed harder against the stone, and the cracks spread. They died because nobody had the courage to use what was right here, under our feet. The founders sealed it away. They hid it. And the world paid the price. Morel, Dumbledore said. He stepped forward, past Harry, past Maxime, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who had talked more than one desperate soul back from the edge. The flame cannot be controlled by force. It was created through a bond, a fusion of two magical traditions, freely joined. What you're attempting, I know what I'm attempting. You're attempting to bend an artifact of love to the purpose of grief. It will not work. The magic will reject you, and the rejection will destroy you, and possibly this school and everyone in it. Morel finally turned. His eyes found Harry. The fever in them shifted, not fading, but focusing. The boy, he said. His magic, I felt it, the night they came down here. When he stood before this door, the flame responded. It reached for him. His gaze moved to Fleur. And her. The Vila fire. Together, he stopped. Swallowed. They could do it. What I can't. They could control it. That is the plan, Dumbledore said gently. Harry and Fleur will channel the flame. Reinforce the wards. But you must step aside, Emile. You must let them work. Morel's face contorted. For a terrible moment, Harry saw the war raging behind his eyes, 15 years of obsession, of single-minded devotion to a goal that had defined and devoured him, battling against the simple, brutal truth that he was not the one who could finish it. I can't, Morel whispered. I can't let it go. If I let it go, then what was it all for? The years, the research, the sacrifice, it was for this moment, Harry said. Everyone looked at him. Harry stepped forward. Not past Dumbledore, beside him. He looked at Morel, at the broken man pressed against the door, and he felt something unexpected, not anger, not fear, but recognition. He knew this man. Not personally, but he knew the shape of the wound. The void left by people who should have been there and weren't. You spent 15 years mapping these tunnels, Harry said. Finding the passage, identifying the wards, understanding the flame. Without your research, we wouldn't know what it is or how to reach it or what it takes to control it. You did the work, Professor. You laid the path. He paused. Now let someone walk it. Morel stared at him. His hand was still on the door, but the pressure had eased. The fever in his eyes dimmed, replaced by something rawer, the exhaustion of a man who had been running for so long he'd forgotten how to stop. Claire would have liked you, Morel said. His voice was barely a whisper. She was Muggle-born. Brave. Kind. She walked into a world she didn't understand and made it her own. His hand dropped from the door. Sophie would be your age now. 11. Starting her first year. I'm sorry, Harry said. I'm so sorry. Morel's face crumpled. Not dramatically, he wasn't a man who did anything dramatically. It was a quiet collapse, internal, the architecture of his composure simply giving way. He stepped back from the door and sat on the tunnel floor, his back against the wall, his head in his hands. Maxine went to him. She knelt, an impressive feat given her size, and put one enormous hand on his shoulder. She said something in French, too quiet for Harry to hear, and Morel made a sound that might have been a word or might have been the last breath of a 15-year vigil finally ending. "Harry," Dumbledore said. "Fleur. It's time." They stepped forward. The door was cracking faster now, chunks of stone falling away, white light flooding through the gaps. The roar of the flame was deafening, a sound that lived in the bones rather than the ears. Harry could feel the raw magic pressing against the failing barrier, immense and hot and alive. "Together," Fleur said. She held out her hand. Harry took it. They'd practiced this. Weeks of sessions on the terrace, building the resonance second by second, learning the shape of each other's magic the way musicians learn to play in harmony. But practice was practice, and this was real, and the difference was the difference between singing in the shower and singing in a cathedral. Harry closed his eyes. Reached for the feeling, the one that lived beneath the magic, beneath the power, in the place where Fleur was not a villa or a witch or a classmate but a person he trusted completely. The person who told him the truth when no one else would. Who'd corrected his grammar and guarded his back and stood beside him in the dark. Fleur reached back. The resonance ignited. The golden white light was immediate and overwhelming, stronger than any session on the terrace, stronger than the mountain, stronger than anything they'd produced before. Harry gasped. The power flooded through him, and Fleur's fire blazed in his veins alongside his own magic, and for a moment he couldn't tell where he ended and she began. The door shattered. Not opened. Shattered. The remains of the stone blew inward, carried by the force of their combined magic and the pressure of the flame behind it. Dust and fragments filled the air, and then cleared, and the chamber of the eternal flame opened before them. It was exactly as Harry remembered from his first visit, the cathedral-sized space, the basin of dark stone at its center. But the flame itself was different. Before, it had been small, controlled, a campfire. Now it was a conflagration. White fire roared from the basin to the ceiling, wild and uncontained, the energy of 8 centuries of ward maintenance released in a single, continuous eruption. "Channel it!" Dumbledore shouted from behind them. "Into the ward structure. Follow the pathways carved into the floor." Harry looked down. The chamber floor was covered in channels, grooves cut into the stone, radiating from the basin like spokes of a wheel, extending to the walls and beyond. The ward network. The circulatory system of Beauxbatons' magical defenses, designed to carry the flame's energy throughout the building. The channels were dark. Empty. The energy that should have flowed through them had been redirected upward by the ward failure, erupting from the basin in a geyser of uncontrolled power. "We have to redirect it," Fleur said. "Back into the channels. Back into the wards." "How?" "We are the how. Our magic is compatible with the flame. We can shape it." She gripped his hand tighter. "Think about the channels. Picture the energy flowing into them. Use the resonance as a funnel." Harry pictured it. The white fire, streaming downward instead of upward. Filling the channels, flowing outward, feeding the wards. He held the image in his mind and pushed it through the resonance, through the fused magic, toward the flame. The flame resisted. Not maliciously, the way a river resists a dam. The energy was flowing in one direction, and changing that direction required overcoming momentum. Harry pushed harder. Fleur pushed with him. The golden white light of their resonance met the white fire of the flame, and for a moment the chamber was a battleground of competing forces, their will against the flame's inertia. Harry's scar exploded. The soul fragment, dormant for days, woke with a shriek of fury. The flame's purifying energy had reached it, not intentionally, just by proximity, and the fragment reacted the way darkness reacts to light, violently. Pain. Harry had thought he understood pain, the Dursleys' casual cruelty, the scar's burning episodes, the exhaustion of overextended magic. He hadn't understood pain. This was pain, a white-hot lance driven through his skull, the fragment thrashing inside his head like a trapped animal, fighting the purifying fire with everything it had. Harry. Fleur's voice, sharp with fear. Harry, stay with me. He tried. The pain was blinding, eclipsing everything, the chamber, the flame, the resonance. He could feel the connection faltering, the golden white light flickering as his concentration shattered. I can't. Yes you can. Look at me. Harry, look at me. He opened his eyes. Fleur's face was inches from his, her blue eyes blazing with Vila fire, her hand locked on his so tightly he could feel her heartbeat through her fingers. I see you, she said. The words were deliberate, precise, a callback, a lifeline. Not the scar. Not the fragment. You. Stay with me. Harry held her gaze. The pain didn't lessen, it couldn't, not while the flame was burning and the fragment was screaming, but it moved. From the center of his world to the periphery. From the only thing to one thing among many. Because at the center, replacing the pain, was Fleur. Her fire, her will, her absolute refusal to let him go. The resonance surged. They pushed together. The flame responded, not resisting now but joining, its energy aligning with theirs, recognizing the same fused magic that had created it 1,000 years ago. The white fire bent. Redirected. Streamed downward from the ceiling, into the basin, and out through the channels in the floor. Harry felt the wards reactivate. One by one, like lights turning on in a dark building, the magical defenses of Beauxbatons came back online, not weakly, not tentatively, but with the full, thundering force of an artifact that had been waiting 8 centuries for someone to turn the key. The palace above them groaned, not with damage but with restoration, stone and magic realigning, the building remembering what it was supposed to be. And the flame, channeled through the resonance, reached the fragment in Harry's scar. It wasn't like the fire on the mountain. It wasn't a battle. It was surgery, precise, controlled, the purifying energy guided by 2 wills working in perfect unison. Harry felt the fragment's grip loosen. Felt it peel away from his own magic like dead skin from a wound. It screamed, not a sound, but a vibration, a psychic wail of rage and fear and desperation, and Harry let it go. Not with anger. Not with triumph. With something quieter. Goodbye, he said. The fragment tore free. A wisp of darkness, small and writhing, rose from his scar and hung in the air for a single heartbeat. The eternal flame caught it. Consumed it. And it was gone, not destroyed, exactly, but unmade. Returned to the nothing it should always have been. Harry's knees buckled. Fleur caught him, or he caught her, they went down together, tangled, gasping, the resonance dissolving as their energy bottomed out. The flame in the basin settled, no longer a conflagration but a steady, controlled burn, feeding the ward channels with quiet, patient power. The roar faded to a hum. The chamber, for the first time in hours, was still. Dumbledore reached them first. His wand moved over Harry's forehead, casting diagnostics, and his face, when the results came in, transformed. The gravity, the concern, the careful calculation, all of it fell away, replaced by something Harry had never seen on the old wizard's face. Relief. Pure, uncomplicated relief. It's gone, Dumbledore said. The fragment. It's gone. Harry lay on the chamber floor, his hands still tangled with Fleur's, and breathed. The scar was silent. For the first time in his life, in his entire life, from the moment Voldemort's curse had marked him, the scar was completely, absolutely silent. Harry. Fleur's voice, beside him, shaky with exhaustion. How do you feel? Light, he said. And laughed, because it was the only word that fit. I feel light. Maxime appeared, helping Morel to his feet. The professor looked at the burning flame, steady now, purposeful, the artifact doing what it was always meant to do, and his face was a landscape of emotions that Harry couldn't fully map. Loss, yes. The death of a 15-year obsession. But also something else. Completion. Resolution. The look of a man who had reached the end of a road and found, waiting there, not what he'd expected but what he needed. The wards are holding, Maxime reported. She was running diagnostics, her wand tracing patterns in the air. More than holding. They're stronger than they've been in a century. The flame is fully integrated with the ward network. As the founders intended, Dumbledore said. The original design was always meant to function this way, the flame at the heart, the wards extending outward, maintained by compatible casters. He looked at Harry and Fleur with an expression that blended wonder and sadness and something that might have been hope. The question is whether those casters need to remain in proximity. The flame is self-sustaining, Fleur said. She was still on the floor, making no effort to stand. Her voice was hoarse. Once directed into the channels, the energy flows on its own. It doesn't need us to maintain it. Just to initialize. Then the wards will hold. Indefinitely. As long as the flame burns. And the flame is eternal, Dumbledore finished. Yes. That would be the point of the name. The tiniest smile crossed Fleur's face. Even exhausted, even drained, even lying on the floor of an underground chamber beside a boy with a newly vacant scar, she had room for irony. Getting out of the tunnels was slower than getting in. Harry and Fleur were barely functional, they leaned on each other, staggering, their magical reserves so depleted that even a Lumos charm was beyond them. Maxime carried Morel, who had lapsed into a stunned silence that seemed equal parts shock and catharsis. Dumbledore led the way, his wand casting steady light, his pace measured to their slowest member. The tunnels were quiet now. The ward bleed had stopped, the walls were dark, inert, the mineral veins no longer pulsing. The air was cool and still, carrying not the smell of magical absence but something gentler. Stone. Earth. The deep, clean smell of a place that was whole again. They climbed the staircase. Emerged into the archive. Found Luke, Elise, and Tarek exactly where they'd left them, sitting on the archive floor with their wands drawn and expressions of such intense, anxious focus that they looked 10 years older than they were. Luke saw Harry and scrambled to his feet. You're alive. I'm alive. Both of you. Both of us. Luke's face did something complicated, the mask of bravery collapsing into the reality of an 11-year-old who'd spent the last hour convinced his best friend was going to die underground. He grabbed Harry in a hug that was fierce enough to bruise. Don't you ever, Luke said into Harry's shoulder. Don't you ever. I won't, Harry said. And hugged him back. Elise had gone to Fleur, speaking to her in rapid, quiet French that Harry couldn't follow. Tarek stood beside Morel, not speaking, just present, a steady, calm anchor for a man who looked like he'd been taken apart and put back together in a different order. They made their way back through the palace. The corridors were empty, the students were still in the great hall, but the building itself felt different. Alive. The ambient hum of magic, which had been discordant and strained for weeks, was smooth now, steady, a deep bass note that you felt in your chest rather than heard with your ears. The portraits were awake and chattering excitedly. The floating chandeliers burned with a new brightness. Even the marble floors seemed to gleam more than they had before, as though the palace was preening. It knows, Fleur murmured, touching the wall as they walked. The building knows the flame is active. It's happy. Can a building be happy? Luke asked. This one can. Beauxbatons was built to house the flame's magic. For 800 years, it's been functioning on reserves, like a body running on too little blood. Now the heart is beating again. They reached the great hall. Maxime entered first, and the wave of silence that met her was immediate and total. 500 students, every face turned toward the doors, every eye wide. Maxime looked at her school. Her students. The community she'd built and defended and held together through a night that could have ended in rubble and ruin. "The wards are restored," she said. "The crisis is over. You are safe." The noise that followed was unlike anything Harry had ever heard, not cheering exactly, though there was cheering, but something bigger. The collective exhale of 500 people releasing a fear they'd been holding for hours. Students hugged. Some cried. The Soulclat table erupted in a chant that Harry couldn't follow but that made Luke grin so wide his face nearly split. Harry stood in the doorway and watched, and Fleur stood beside him, and their shoulders touched, and neither of them moved. "How's your scar?" Fleur asked. Harry touched his forehead. "Felt skin. Felt nothing else." "Quiet," he said. "Good." Fleur. "What?" "Thank you." She didn't answer immediately. She leaned into his shoulder, just slightly, just enough, and the contact was warm and steady and said more than words could. "You're welcome," she said. "Now let's sit down before I fall down." They sat. Luke appeared with food, croissants and hot chocolate and fruit, conjured from somewhere or stolen from somewhere else, Harry didn't ask. Elise produced a blanket, which she draped over Fleur's shoulders with the matter-of-fact tenderness of someone who decided that caring for her friends was a permanent job. Tarek sat quietly and ate and was, as always, a still point in a turning world. The great hall settled. The noise became warmth. Students drifted back to their tables, their houses, their routines, the machinery of normal life reasserting itself with the resilience of the young. Harry ate his croissant and drank his hot chocolate and felt the silence in his scar like a gift. Across the hall, Dumbledore caught his eye. The old wizard raised his teacup in a small, private toast. Harry raised his hot chocolate in return. Something passed between them, not understanding, exactly, because there was still too much they didn't know about each other. But respect. And the beginning, perhaps, of something that could become trust. The night deepened. Students were sent to their dormitories. The professors began the work of assessment and repair, the physical kind, not the magical, which the flame was already handling. Maxime's voice carried through the corridors, calm and competent, the voice of a woman who had faced the worst and found it manageable. Harry walked to the Soulclat common room with Luke and Tarek on either side of him. At the staircase, he paused. "I need a minute," he said. "I'm not leaving you alone," Luke said. "I'm not going anywhere. I just need a minute." Luke studied him. Then nodded, squeezed his shoulder, and went up the stairs. Tarek followed with a quiet "good night" that carried the weight of everything unsaid. Harry walked to the window at the end of the corridor. The mountains were visible through the glass, white with December snow, silver in the moonlight, massive and ancient and unmoved by the drama that had unfolded in their foundations. He pressed his hand to the glass. Cold, smooth, real. He was 11 years old. He was a wizard. He lived in a palace in the French Pyrenees. He had friends who would sit on a floor for 2 hours waiting for him to come back from the underworld. He had a partner whose fire fit his magic like breath to a song. And for the first time since the night Voldemort had walked into his nursery and ended his old life and marked the beginning of his new one, Harry Potter's scar was just a scar. He stood at the window for a long time, watching the mountains, feeling the silence. Then he went to bed. Chapter 6, The Boy Who Chose December settled over Beauxbatons like a held breath. The days after the Flames' restoration were strange, quiet in a way that felt earned rather than empty. The palace hummed with a vitality it hadn't possessed before, the newly awakened ward suffusing every stone and beam with a warmth that went beyond temperature. Flowers bloomed on the terraces despite the snow. The enchanted sky in the great hall shone brighter, the stars at night more vivid, as though the building itself were showing off. Students noticed. They walked the corridors with lighter steps, studied in common rooms that felt cozier, slept more soundly in dormitories where the ambient magic now wrapped around them like a second blanket. Harry noticed most of all. Not the palace, himself. The absence of the soul fragment was physical. Not in the scar, which was just a thin line of raised skin now, no different from any childhood scrape, but in his head. For 11 years, he'd carried a weight he hadn't known was there, a low static, a background hum of something other, coloring his thoughts and his dreams like a filter he'd never known to remove. Now it was gone, and the silence it left behind was staggering. He could think clearly. Not that he'd been unable to before, but there was a difference, the difference between seeing through a window and seeing through clean air. His magic responded more precisely. His emotions felt more distinctly his own. Even his sleep had changed, deep, dreamless, restorative, the sleep of someone whose mind belonged entirely to them for the first time. "You look different," Luke told him at breakfast 3 days after the tunnels. "I can't figure out what it is." "Did you grow?" "I don't think so. Something's different. You're lighter. Like someone took a backpack off you that you didn't know you were wearing." Harry stirred his coffee. He hadn't told Luke about the soul fragment, hadn't told anyone except Fleur, who'd known already, and the adults who'd been in the chamber. It felt like the kind of information that would change how people saw him, and he'd had enough of that to last several lifetimes. "Maybe I'm just sleeping better," Harry said. "Maybe." Luke squinted at him. "Or maybe you're doing that annoying thing where something massive happened and you process it privately and the rest of us just have to guess." "I don't do that." "You absolutely do that. It's your signature move. Harry Potter, the boy who processed internally. That's a terrible title. Better than the boy who lived. At least mine's accurate." Harry threw a sugar cube at him. Luke caught it in his coffee. Normalcy, fragile and precious, reasserted itself one breakfast at a time. Morel's hearing took place on a Thursday, in Maxime's office, behind closed doors. Harry wasn't present, students weren't invited, but he learned the outcome that evening from Roier, who stopped him in the corridor with an expression that mixed exhaustion with something softer. "He's been removed from his teaching position," Roier said. "Effective immediately. The board was unanimous on that. What he did, the unauthorized research, the damage to the wards, the endangerment of students, it couldn't stand. And beyond that? He'll face a disciplinary review by the French ministry. Possible charges, depending on the investigation's findings. But Madame Maxime advocated for leniency, and Dumbledore, surprisingly, supported her. They argued that Morel's actions, while reckless, were driven by grief rather than malice, and that his research, misguided as its execution was, ultimately contributed to the flame's successful reactivation. That's generous. It's accurate. Without Morel's 15 years of mapping and study, you and Mademoiselle Delacour would have gone into those tunnels blind. His knowledge, the ward analysis, the identification of the flame, the understanding of what compatible magic meant, all of that informed the plan. He did the wrong things for the right reasons, and the outcome, despite everything, was good. Roier paused. "He's asked to speak with you. Before he leaves." "Leaves?" "He's returning to his family home in Provence. Indefinitely. The ministry will contact him there." Roier studied Harry with an expression that reminded him, suddenly, of that first night on the rock, the careful assessment, the warmth beneath the precision. "You don't have to see him. Nobody would blame you for declining." "I'll see him," Harry said. Morel was in his old office, though it no longer looked like his. The shelves had been emptied, the books packed into crates that lined the walls. The map was gone, confiscated by the ministry as evidence. The desk was bare. The room had the hollow feeling of a space between inhabitants, occupied by ghosts and echoes. Morel stood by the window, looking out at the mountains. He turned when Harry entered, and his face was different, not the coiled intensity Harry had grown accustomed to, but something quieter. Reduced. As though the fever that had driven him for 15 years had finally broken, leaving behind a man who needed to learn how to be a man again without it. Potter. He gestured to the chair. Sit, please. Harry sat. Morel remained standing, hands clasped behind his back, and for a moment neither of them spoke. I owe you an apology, Morel said. Several, in fact. But one in particular. He met Harry's eyes. I used you. Your scar, your connection, I saw them as data. As components of a theory I was constructing. I told myself I was helping you, and parts of that were true, the occlumency training, the diagnostic work. But the truth is that I needed what you carried to validate my research. I needed proof that soul magic existed in the form I'd theorized, because that proof was the bridge to the flame. I know, Harry said. You knew. Fleur told me. Early on. She said you cared about me, but you cared about your research more. Morel's mouth twisted. Mademoiselle Delacour is perceptive to the point of cruelty. She's also correct. He sat on the edge of the desk. I want you to understand something. Not as an excuse, there is no excuse, but as context. When Claire and Sophie died, the world became a problem to be solved. Not lived in. Not experienced. Solved. And the eternal flame was the solution. If I could reach it, control it, build the ward I designed, then death would have a counter. Loss would have an answer. And now? Now I know that loss doesn't have an answer. It has consequences. Responses. Ways of being carried. But not an answer. He looked at his hands. You carried a piece of Voldemort's soul for 11 years. You were 1 year old when it was placed in you. You didn't choose it. You didn't understand it. And yet you survived it, not by solving it, but by being strong enough to hold it until the right moment came to let it go. I had help. You had Mademoiselle Delacour. You had friends. You had a school that, for all its flaws, gave you a place to stand. Morel's voice roughened. I had those things too, once. Before I decided that solving the problem was more important than living alongside it. Harry sat with that for a moment. The empty office creaked around them, the building settling, the wards humming through the walls, the steady pulse of the flame far below. What will you do? Harry asked. I don't know. That's a novel experience. A ghost of a smile, thin and fragile. My sister lives in Provence. She's been asking me to visit for 10 years. I suppose I'll start there. Professor. Harry stood, and the word felt strange. Morel wasn't his professor anymore, might never be again. For what it's worth, the occlumency helped. The diagnostics helped. You were a good teacher, even when you were a bad researcher. Morel looked at him. Something moved behind his eyes, not the fever, not the obsession, but something human and small and grateful. Thank you, Harry, he said. It was the first time he'd used Harry's first name. Harry left the office and didn't look back. Behind him, he heard the soft thud of a crate being lifted, and the quiet footsteps of a man beginning the long walk out of the tunnel he'd dug for himself. The following Monday, Dumbledore returned. Harry had been expecting it. The old wizard had left after the Flames' restoration, citing obligations at Hogwarts, but had made it clear through Maxime that he would return before the end of term. What Harry hadn't expected was who came with him. The black carriage landed on the front lawn at mid-morning, and two figures stepped out. Dumbledore, tall and silver-bearded, in robes of midnight blue. And beside him, a woman Harry had seen once before, sharp-featured, emerald-robed, with the posture of a woman who could intimidate a thunderstorm. McGonagall, Luke said from the courtyard. She's back. She looks angry, Tarek observed. I think that's just her face, Elise said. Fleur appeared beside Harry, having materialized from whatever corner of the palace she'd been studying in. Her eyes tracked the two visitors as they crossed the lawn toward Maxime, who stood at the main entrance in formal amber robes, her expression carefully neutral. "This is the pitch," Fleur said quietly. "The final one. He's bringing McGonagall because she's emotional leverage, your parents' head of house, the woman who watched your mother and father grow up at Hogwarts." "How do you know that?" "Because it's what I would do." She looked at him. "Are you ready?" "I've been ready since October." "Good. Then let them make their case, listen politely, and say no." "You're very confident about my answer." "I know you, Potter. Better than they do. Better than anyone." She said it without hesitation, without embarrassment, a statement of fact, as plain and direct as any correction she'd ever made to his grammar. "Go. I'll be in the library when you're done." She walked away. Harry watched her go, and felt the specific, untranslatable warmth that came from being known. The meeting was in Maxime's office. Just the four of them, Harry, Maxime, Dumbledore, McGonagall. No audience, no delegation, no political apparatus. The chairs were arranged in a loose circle rather than across a desk, which Harry recognized as Maxime's doing, a deliberate removal of hierarchy, placing everyone on equal footing. Dumbledore spoke first. "Harry. Before anything else, how are you?" "Good. Really good, actually." "The scar?" "Silent. Completely." Harry touched his forehead. "It's been 12 days. No prickling, no dreams, no voice. It's just, gone." Dumbledore nodded slowly. His eyes, behind the half-moon spectacles, held a brightness that Harry was learning to read, not the twinkle of whimsy, but the gleam of a mind perpetually in motion, processing, adapting, revising its models of the world. "That is the best news I have heard in a very long time," Dumbledore said. "The removal of the Horcrux, the soul fragment, was something I had spent years believing might be impossible without great sacrifice. That you and Mademoiselle Delacour accomplished it through resonance and the eternal flame is, well. It reshapes my understanding of what is possible." "Horcrux," Harry repeated. "Is that what it's called?" "It is the term for a vessel containing a piece of a soul, deliberately severed through an act of murder. Voldemort created yours unintentionally, the piece that lodged in your scar was an accident, a byproduct of the curse's rebound. But he created others deliberately." The room went still. "Others," Harry said. "I have reason to believe, strong reason, that Voldemort created multiple Horcruxes during his reign. Each one anchoring a fragment of his soul to the physical world, each one preventing his true death." Dumbledore's voice was measured, careful. "The one in your scar has been destroyed. But the others remain. As long as they exist, Voldemort cannot be permanently defeated." "How many?" "I am not certain. My research suggests at least 5, possibly 6, beyond the one you carried. They are hidden, protected, scattered across locations that Voldemort considered significant." Dumbledore leaned forward. "This is why I wanted to speak with you, Harry. Not to recruit you. Not to demand your allegiance. But to be honest with you about the scale of what we face." "We," Harry said. "You mean Britain." "I mean the world. Voldemort's ambitions were never confined to Britain. His movement had roots across Europe, including France. If he returns, when he returns, because I believe it is a matter of when, not if, his reach will extend far beyond the Channel." McGonagall spoke for the first time. Her voice was Scottish, brisk, and carried an undertone of tightly controlled emotion. "Your parents fought him, Harry. They gave their lives to stop him. James and Lily, they were my students. They sat in my classroom. I watched them grow from children to warriors." Her jaw tightened. "I don't say this to guilt you. I say it because you deserve to know the legacy you carry. Not the scar. Not the fame. The choice your parents made, to stand against the darkness, whatever the cost." I know what my parents did, Harry said. And I honor it. But their choice was theirs. Mine is mine. McGonagall's eyes glistened. She nodded once, sharp, and said nothing more. Dumbledore, Harry said. Are you asking me to come to Hogwarts? I am asking you to consider it. Not because Hogwarts is better than Beauxbatons, I am long past such petty competitiveness. A glance at Maxime, who returned it with regal calm. But because the war that is coming will center on Britain. The Horcruxes are there. Voldemort's followers are there. The battlefield, when it materializes, will be there. And you, Harry, whether you choose it or not, are a symbol. A rallying point. The boy who lived. I didn't choose that title. No. But it chose you. And symbols have power, magical and otherwise. Your presence at Hogwarts would strengthen the resistance. Your absence weakens it. And my presence at Beauxbatons? What does that do? Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. It keeps you safe. It keeps you growing. It gives you a home you never had. Then you understand why I'm staying. The silence that followed was long and layered, filled with the things that were said, the things that weren't, and the immense, aching gap between what the world needed from Harry Potter and what Harry Potter needed for himself. Maxime spoke. Her voice was low, deliberate, each word carrying the weight of careful thought. There is something I must tell you, Harry. Something I should have told you months ago. She looked at Dumbledore, then at McGonagall, then back at Harry. The night Professor de Roier came to the shack on the rock, the night he offered you a place at Beauxbatons, that was not a coincidence. And it was not simply because our registry detected your magical surges. Harry's stomach tightened. What do you mean? I intercepted your Hogwarts letter. The words landed like stones in still water. Harry stared at her. The Beauxbatons registry detected your magic, yes. But I was also monitoring the Hogwarts enrollment ledger, a document I have access to through international educational agreements. When your name appeared, I recognized it immediately. And I made a decision. Maxime folded her hands. I sent de Roier before Hogwarts could send Hagrid. I wanted to reach you first. Why? Because I believed, and still believe, that Albus Dumbledore had plans for you that prioritized the war over your well-being. Plans that would place you at the center of a conflict you were too young to understand, in a country where powerful people had competing claims on your future. She met his eyes steadily. And because I foresaw Voldemort's return. Not through prophecy, through analysis. The signs have been accumulating for years. Disappearances. Dark magic signatures. Whispers in the intelligence networks. He is coming back, Harry. And when he does, Britain will be the most dangerous place in the world for you. So you took me. I offered you an alternative. A school outside Britain's political sphere, where you could learn and grow without being shaped into someone else's weapon. Her voice softened. I will not pretend my motives were entirely selfless. Having Harry Potter at Beauxbatons carries political advantages I am not naive enough to ignore. But I swear to you, on my magic, on my name, that your safety and your freedom were my primary concerns. Harry looked at Dumbledore. The old wizard's expression was unreadable. You knew, Harry said to him. You knew she intercepted the letter. I suspected. Maxime confirmed it, privately, several weeks ago. And you're not angry? I was. Initially. I had plans, as Maxime rightly observes, and those plans were disrupted. Dumbledore paused. But I have learned, over a very long life, that my plans are not always correct. And what I have seen this year, what you have become, here, at this school, with these people, suggests that Maxime's disruption was, in fact, the better path. You're saying she was right. I'm saying the outcome speaks for itself. You are stronger, happier, and more capable than any scenario I had envisioned for you at Hogwarts. You have a support system that I, in my distant oversight, failed to provide. And you have freed yourself from the Horcrux, something I had no plan for achieving safely. Dumbledore's smile was small, wry, tinged with the self-awareness of a man revising his own legend in real time. I am not infallible, Harry. I have made mistakes with your life that I will carry to my grave. The least I can do is acknowledge when someone else made a better choice. Harry sat with this. All of it, Maxime's confession, Dumbledore's concession, McGonagall's silent, glistening eyes. The weight of two of the most powerful people in the wizarding world, sitting in a room, telling him the truth. The Horcruxes, Harry said. You said there are more. Yes. And you're going to hunt them. I am. With the help of trusted allies. It will be dangerous work, and it will take time. I want to help. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose. Harry, not now. Not this year. But eventually. When I'm trained, when I'm ready. The war isn't just Britain's problem, you said so yourself. And I'm not going to sit in a palace in the mountains while people die because a monster was too afraid of death to stay dead. He paused. But I'll help on my terms. From here. With my people. Your people, Dumbledore repeated. My friends. Fleur. Beauxbatons. Harry looked around the office, at the high windows, the mountain view, the crest on the wall. This is my home. I'm not leaving it. But that doesn't mean I'm hiding from the fight. Dumbledore studied him for a long time. Then he stood, and the movement had a finality to it, the closing of a chapter, the turning of a page. You are remarkable, Harry, he said. Your mother's courage. Your father's fire. And something that is entirely your own, a clarity of purpose that I, at 112, am still learning to match. He held out his hand. Harry shook it. The offer of Hogwarts is withdrawn, Dumbledore said. Not because it is closed to you, but because you have made it redundant. You are exactly where you belong. McGonagall stood too. She crossed to Harry, took both his hands in hers, and held them tightly. Her grip was strong, her eyes bright. Your mother would be so proud, she said. So incredibly proud. Harry's throat ached. He nodded because speaking wasn't possible. McGonagall released his hands, straightened her hat, and walked out of the office with the rigid spine of a woman who would cry in private and nowhere else. Dumbledore followed, pausing at the door. I will write to you, Harry. Regularly. About the Horcrux hunt, about the war's progress, about anything you wish to know. No more secrets. No more distant oversight. He smiled. You've earned transparency. I'll try to deserve it. He left. Harry and Maxime sat in the quiet office. The mountains framed the window. The palace hummed around them. Are you angry with me? Maxime asked. For intercepting the letter? For all of it. The interception. The politics. The things I didn't tell you. Harry thought about it honestly. He searched for anger and found, not nothing, exactly, but not the rage he might have expected. What he found instead was understanding. Maxime had acted. Not perfectly, not transparently, but decisively, and the decision had given him Beauxbatons, had given him Fleur, had given him a life he couldn't have imagined from the cupboard under the stairs. You should have told me sooner, he said. About the interception. About your reasons. Yes. I should have. But I'm not angry. I'm grateful. The word felt insufficient, but it was true. You gave me a choice. Even if the way you created that choice was imperfect, you gave it to me. And I chose this. Maxime's eyes shone. She blinked once, hard, and the moisture was gone, replaced by the composure of a headmistress who could level mountains with a look. Go find your friends, Harry, she said. It's nearly Christmas. You have celebrating to do. He found them on the third terrace. All four of them, Fleur on the fountain's edge, Luke sprawled on the frost-covered grass with his cloak pulled around him like a sleeping bag, Elise reading with gloved hands, Tarek sitting cross-legged with his oud across his knees, picking out a quiet melody that wound through the winter air like smoke. How'd it go? Luke asked without opening his eyes. Dumbledore withdrew the Hogwarts offer. Permanently. Luke's eyes snapped open. He what? He said I was where I belonged. His words. Dumbledore, the Dumbledore, Albus Dumbledore, the most powerful wizard in the world, told you to stay at Beauxbatons? Basically. And Maxime? She told me the truth about why she recruited me. All of it. Harry sat on the fountain beside Fleur and told them. Not the Horcrux details, that was between him and Dumbledore, but the rest. Maxime's interception. Her reasoning. Dumbledore's concession. McGonagall's tears. When he finished, the terrace was quiet except for Tarek's oud, which had shifted into something slower, more contemplative. So she played chess with your life, Elise said. Maxime. She moved you from one board to another. Yes. And Dumbledore was going to do the same thing, just from a different direction. Yes. And you're okay with this? I'm okay with the outcome. The process, that's complicated. But I'm 11. Everything is complicated when you're 11 and the world keeps treating you like a pawn. Harry shrugged. At least Maxime's board had better food. Luke laughed. Elise shook her head but smiled. Tarek played on. Fleur said nothing. She was looking at the mountains, her face still, her hands folded in her lap. Harry waited. Walk with me, she said. They left the terrace and walked through the garden, down the frost-covered path that wound between the dormant rose bushes, past the hedge maze that the groundskeeper enchanted to rearrange itself every Thursday, to the stone balustrade at the garden's edge where the view opened up and the Pyrenees filled the horizon from edge to edge. They stood side by side, looking out at the mountains. The December air was cold and clean, carrying the scent of pine and snow and the faint, underlying sweetness that Harry now recognized as the eternal flame's magic, suffusing the grounds, warming the world from below. You're staying, Fleur said. I'm staying. Not because of Maxime's manipulation. Not because of Dumbledore's concession. Not because of the politics or the war or the Horcruxes. No. Then why? Harry turned to face her. She was already looking at him, her blue eyes steady, the wind catching her silver blonde hair and sending it streaming. She was beautiful, she was always beautiful, that was the burden and the gift of her blood, but that wasn't what Harry saw. He saw the girl who'd corrected his grammar until it stuck. Who'd told him the truth about Morel. Who'd stood beside him in a burning chamber and held his hand and pulled a piece of Voldemort out of his skull with nothing but fire and will. Because of you, he said. Because of Luke and Elise and Tarek. Because of Valancourt and Bissett and de Rosier and this ridiculous palace that blooms flowers in December. He paused. But mostly because of you. Fleur's expression didn't change. Not outwardly. But something happened behind her eyes, a shift, a settling, the last piece of a puzzle finding its place. That's a lot of pressure to put on one person, Potter. You can handle it. Obviously I can handle it. I'm extraordinary. Modest, too. Modesty is for people who need it. The corner of her mouth twitched. I'm going to say something, and you're going to listen, and you're not going to make it weird. I make no promises. You are the most stubborn, reckless, emotionally constipated person I have ever met. You have the self-preservation instincts of a lemming and the linguistic skills of a particularly motivated parrot. You threw yourself at a shadow creature with a stick. You walked into a collapsing tunnel system with a soul fragment in your head. You argue with Dumbledore. You are, by any reasonable measure, impossible. Is this going somewhere positive, or, you are also the only person who has ever seen me? Not the allure, not the villa, not the Delacour name. Me. Her voice softened. Not cracked, Fleur didn't crack. Softened, like steel heated to the point where it could be shaped. I spent my whole life believing that nobody would ever look at me and see a person instead of a thing. You did it on the first day. Without trying. Without even knowing what you were doing. Don't interrupt me. I'm being vulnerable and I hate it. Harry closed his mouth. You are my partner, Fleur said. My anchor. The person whose magic fits mine in a way that shouldn't exist and does anyway. I don't know what that means yet, we're 11, and I refuse to be dramatic about it, but I know that it matters. That you matter. To me. She stopped. The wind blew. The mountains watched. Can I talk now? Harry asked. If you must. You're also the most stubborn person I've ever met. You correct my grammar during life-threatening situations. You called my accent a cat trying to purr with a mouthful of cotton. You once made me rewrite an essay 4 times because I used the subjunctive wrong. You did use the subjunctive wrong. The point is, you are terrifying and brilliant and the best thing that has ever happened to me. And I know we're 11, and I know this isn't, we're not, I'm not saying, you're saying we're partners. I'm saying we're partners. And I'm saying that whatever comes next, the war, the Horcruxes, growing up, all of it, I want to face it standing next to you. Fleur looked at him. The firelight that lived behind her eyes, the Vila flame, the one that came from blood and bone and something older than either, burned low and steady and warm. Acceptable, she said. Acceptable? I'm not going to swoon, Potter. That's what the allure is for. This is something else. She held out her hand, palm up, the way she had the night they'd first shaken on their partnership. This is a choice. Harry took her hand. Her grip was warm and certain and absolutely, unmistakably real. One more thing, he said. What? My French has gotten pretty good. Fleur's composure broke. She laughed, the full, bright, startled laugh he'd heard only a handful of times, the one that made her look her age and sounded like the beginning of something. Harry laughed too, and they stood at the edge of the garden with the mountains spread before them and laughed because they were alive and they were together and the world, for all its darkness, was also impossibly, stubbornly full of light. The last week of term passed in a blur of warmth and celebration. Beauxbatons' Christmas traditions were unlike anything Harry had experienced, which, given that his previous Christmases had consisted of watching Dudley open presents while he received a coat hanger and a pair of Vernon's old socks, wasn't saying much. The palace was transformed. Enchanted snow fell from the great hall ceiling, cold enough to catch on your tongue, warm enough to melt before it hit the floor. Garlands of living holly wound through the corridors, and the portraits sang carols in a dozen languages, harmonizing with cheerful imprecision. The house elves, Beauxbatons had them, though they wore tiny blue uniforms instead of pillowcases and seemed vastly more cheerful than any servant Harry had encountered, outdid themselves with feasts that lasted for hours. On Christmas Eve, the 5 of them sat around a fire in the Solclat common room, an exception to the house rules, negotiated by Luke through a combination of charm, persistence, and what Harry suspected was outright bribery of a prefect. Fleur and Elise were technically trespassing, but the prefect in question had conveniently decided to patrol a different corridor. Luke had produced a bottle of something he called cider that was clearly more than cider. Tarek played his oud. Elise was teaching Harry a card game that appeared to involve both strategy and lying, at which Fleur was devastatingly good. You're cheating, Harry said, throwing down his cards. I'm not cheating. I'm reading your face. You have the worst poker expression I've ever seen. He really does, Luke agreed. It's like watching a puppy try to bluff. I don't know why I'm friends with any of you. Because without us, you'd be sitting alone in a corner processing things internally, Elise said. Which, as we've established, is your default state. I process things externally now. I've grown. You told us about the Dumbledore meeting 3 hours after it happened, Tarek pointed out mildly. And only because Fleur made you. Growth is a process. They laughed. The fire crackled. Outside, enchanted snow fell over the palace grounds, and the Pyrenees stood black and silver against a sky full of stars. Harry looked around at his friends. Luke, who'd been the first person to shake his hand and had never, not once, treated him as anything other than Harry. Elise, sharp and steady, who'd appointed herself their collective conscience and carried the role with the authority of someone twice her age. Tarek, quiet and deep, whose calm was a gift in a group that tended toward chaos. Fleur, fire and ice and everything in between, who'd taken a scared, silent boy and turned him into someone worth knowing by the simple, brutal method of refusing to accept anything less. Thank you, Harry said. They looked at him. For this. For everything. I spent 10 years thinking I was nothing. A burden. A freak. The kid in the cupboard that nobody wanted. His throat tightened, but he kept going. And then I came here, and I met you, and you just, let me be a person. A whole person. Not the boy who lived, not the orphan, not the scar. Just Harry. The fire popped. The common room was very warm. You're making it weird, Luke said. His voice was thick. Shut up. I'm being vulnerable. We know, Fleur said. We're very proud of you. Luke reached over and punched Harry's arm, which was his language for every emotion he couldn't say out loud. Elise wiped her eyes with practiced nonchalance. Tarek smiled and played a chord on his oud that sounded, somehow, exactly like the feeling in the room. They stayed up until midnight. Tarek fell asleep first, curled up in an armchair with his oud across his chest. Luke and Elise got into an argument about the card game's rules that gradually devolved into incoherent mumbling as sleep claimed them both. The fire burned low. Harry and Fleur sat on the floor beside the hearth, shoulders touching, watching the embers. Next year will be harder, Fleur said quietly. The war is coming. Even here, even behind the wards and the flame, it'll reach us eventually. I know. And you'll want to fight. I know you will. It's who you are. It's who we are. Fleur's head settled against his shoulder. A small motion, barely perceptible, but Harry felt it like a thunderclap. Then we fight together, she said. When the time comes. Together. The embers glowed. The snow fell. And somewhere far to the north, across the mountains and the plains and the dark winter sea, in a castle Harry had never seen, the war was gathering like a storm on the horizon, patient, inevitable, waiting for the moment when patience ran out. But that was next year. That was tomorrow, or the day after, or the year after that. Tonight was Christmas Eve, and Harry was warm, and Fleur's head was on his shoulder, and his friends were sleeping around him, and the scar on his forehead was just a scar. He closed his eyes. In the morning, there would be presents, real ones, chosen with care by people who knew him and loved him. There would be breakfast in the great hall, and laughter, and the particular, irreplaceable chaos of a holiday spent among friends. There would be owl post from Dumbledore, keeping his promise of transparency. There would be letters to write, to the world that was waiting, to the future that was taking shape, to the darkness that didn't know yet what was coming for it. But that was morning. This was now. Harry Potter, the boy who survived, the boy who chose, the boy who found his home 1,000 miles from where the world expected him to be, sat in a common room in the French Pyrenees on Christmas Eve, and was, for the first time in his life, entirely at peace. Outside, the eternal flame burned on beneath the palace, steady and strong and patient, and the wards it fed hummed through the ancient stone, and the mountains held it all, the magic and the memory and the children sleeping within, in their vast, indifferent, eternal embrace. The snow fell. The fire burned. The boy who chose stayed exactly where he wanted to be,